Hey guys, tonight's story begins with a cold, so personal, it feels like it crawled under your blanket just to laugh in your face. The floor creaks with straw that smells like turnips gone wrong, and the fire in the corner has already quit, leaving behind smoke that's more vengeful than warm. Your only defense is a patchwork of rags, a pig that snores like a drunk uncle, and the faint hope that body heat counts as strategy. Outside, a rooster is wide awake but refuses to crow, probably out of protest. Because here, survival isn't about comfort. It's about making it through the longest, coldest nights, with all your toes still attached. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You feel the frost creep in before the rooster even considers crowing. It slithers through the cracks in the shutters, curls its way under the door, and settles on your face like an uninvited guest, determined to stay the season. The kind of cold that doesn't knock politely or even announce itself. It just arrives, drags its muddy boots across the floor, and asks loudly why the soup tastes like despair again. Your breath comes out in pale puffs you can almost count, as though your lungs have decided to keep score. The blankets, if you can call them that, are thin enough to be morally offensive. One smells faintly of cabbage. Another smells like whoever had it last winter, and you're not asking questions about which cousin that might have been. Everything is stiff. The bread, left from yesterday, has achieved the density of roof tiles, and you know at least one villager will attempt to patch a leak with it before the month is done. Your boots have frozen into a shape that suggests they no longer respect the general arrangement of human feet. Even your eyebrows have grown brittle. Tiny, icy fences that could probably cut bread if you leaned forward fast enough. When you sit up, the straw beneath you crunches like you've just broken a dozen promises at once, and the sound startles the mouse that has been living in your bed since autumn. You lock eyes with it, neither of you willing to admit that you're equally invested in the warmth the other provides. The cold is not majestic, despite what wandering poets say about winter's beauty. It's not crisp, it's not noble, it's not some silvery miracle. It's petty. It seeps into your bones on purpose, nipping at your toes just to laugh when you hop about muttering curses you swore you'd stop using in front of the priest. The cold is personal. It chooses you like a rival. You can almost hear it whisper as you fumble with your tunic strings. Nice try, peasant. That hole under your arm is my new front door, and you know the moment you step outside, your nose will betray you, dripping dramatically, refusing to cooperate with dignity. Beyond your own walls, if you can call wattle and daub walls, the village groans awake in the half-dark. Smoke refuses to rise from most chimneys. The logs inside too damp, the kindling too resentful of being bothered. The baker's roof has sprouted its usual icicles, long crooked teeth that look ready to bite off anyone's hat. Somewhere a dog whimpers, burrowing deeper into the haystack it claimed 3 weeks ago, while a pig sneezes in the distance with such force you briefly wonder if the heavens are cracking. The rooster, meanwhile, is silent, wide awake, feathers puffed against the cold, but apparently too offended to perform his only duty. Maybe he's protesting the lack of feed, maybe he's on strike, or maybe he too has realized that nothing about this morning deserves acknowledgement. You stumble to the hearth, which is less a hearth and more a blackened corner where fire once flirted with permanence. A pile of reluctant logs leans against the wall, each one damp with the smugness of knowing it will take at least 3 attempts and 2 curses to ignite. The embers from last night are long gone, leaving only a faint ash that rises like ghosts when you poke it with a stick. You mutter promises to the wood, Promises you don't mean, swearing you'll dry it better next time. You'll chop it straighter. You'll never steal from the cooper's pile again. The logs are unmoved. Your fingers, already numb, fumble with flint and steel until one tiny spark leaps out, flickers bravely, then dies as if ashamed of being born in such a house. You sigh so hard, you nearly extinguish the memory of fire itself. Outside, the first stirrings of human complaint echo through the square. Old women grunt as they tighten shawls around shoulders, already hunched from years of refusing to listen to anyone younger than 60. A child wails, mostly for attention, but also because his bare toes have fused spiritually, if not physically, with the frozen mud. Someone yells at a goat to stop chewing a frozen laundry line, but the goat doesn't listen, because goats never do. The sound carries oddly in the morning air, crisp and unforgiving, like every noise is a secret exposed. You pull your cloak tighter around you, though it's less cloak and more a threadbare suggestion of one, and prepare yourself for the day's first humiliations. Your neighbor's door creaks open, and out stumbles the blacksmith's apprentice, clutching his arms to his chest as if that will prevent frostbite. He sneezes so loudly a crow flaps off the church roof in protest, leaving behind something suspiciously aimed at the cooper's head. The apprentice mutters something about hell being warmer than here and heads toward the forge, where the promise of fire at least exists, even if it burns more metal than flesh. Across the way, two women exchange greetings with the kind of cheer that sounds less like joy and more like a challenge to the weather. "Good morning," one says through clenched teeth. "Is it?" the other replies. The first nods. No. The cold forces people into strange rituals. You notice one man hopping from foot to foot outside his cottage, chanting something about keeping the frost demons at bay. Another rubs garlic along the lintel of his door, swearing it keeps both spirits and neighbors away. A young boy emerges wearing 3 tunics layered in the wrong order, looking like an onion that lost a bar fight. His mother yells at him to fetch water from the well, conveniently forgetting the rope has frozen stiff since Michaelmas. He trudges away anyway, dragging the bucket like a condemned prisoner. Back in your cottage, you finally coax a flame into existence. Small, pitiful, but alive. You crouch over it, guarding it like treasure, whispering encouragement as though the fire is a nervous child about to perform at a feast. The warmth barely reaches your hands, but it is enough to convince you that perhaps today will not end with your toes breaking off like brittle twigs. Outside, the village stirs louder, a reluctant orchestra tuning itself for another performance. You can hear the shuffle of boots, the clatter of pails, the occasional curse at livestock that refuse to cooperate with the concept of winter. And as you step outside, breath clouding, nose already rebelling, you realize that the cold is not just weather, it's a companion. A cruel, mocking companion who insists on reminding you with every shiver that life is less about comfort and more about endurance. The cold doesn't want you dead. Not yet. It just wants you humbled, wrapped in every rag you own, walking across a frozen square where every stone, every icicle, every stiff breath insists on the same truth. The nights are long, the fires are weak, and survival will not be graceful, but it will be yours. You crouch in front of the hearth like a desperate suitor, whispering promises you have no intention of keeping. The logs, still damp from the rain 3 days ago, glare back at you in their own wooden silence. You arrange them carefully, then less carefully, then angrily, until it looks less like a fire and more like a badly staged crime scene. The flint sparks once, twice, a dozen times, each flicker leaping into existence with a show of promise before dying as if it suddenly remembered better places to be. Smoke begins to curl anyway, spitefully, thick and acrid, clawing its way straight into your eyes and down your throat until you cough like someone who swallowed a hedgehog the wrong way. You wipe your face, sniffle, and mutter, "Just burn, damn you," as though the logs might finally respond to reason. Fire, you remind yourself, is not a right. It's a negotiation, and you are a terrible diplomat. Each stick demands attention. Every twig sulks when placed in the wrong direction, and the larger logs only smirk, knowing they're the true rulers of this arrangement, and you are a peasant begging for mercy. You poke at the kindling with a stick you've already broken in frustration. Sparks spit out like tiny traitors, immediately fleeing toward the nearest bit of loose straw on the floor. You lunge, slap it down, and stomp until your heel smells faintly of singed hay. For a moment, you imagine the village gossip that would follow if you burned your own cottage down before sunrise. Someone would probably call it poetic. Someone else would blame goats. Your neighbor insists wood burns better if you sing to it. He claims his grandfather swore by it, crooning old ballads to the fire until the flames roared to life like drunkards at a tavern song. You tried it once, your voice cracking embarrassingly over a tune about St. Dunstan and the devil, and the only result was your sister snorting so hard she dropped a pot of beans. The logs didn't so much as twitch. You realize now that your neighbor's fire burns better because he stores his wood under a roof, not under a perpetually leaking thatch where rain sneaks in like a thief. But you keep singing anyway sometimes, muttering low, broken melodies because in the dark before dawn, when your fingers are stiff and your breath fogs the air, even foolish rituals feel like armor. The smoke thickens. It doesn't rise up the chimney as designed, but instead rolls downward, curling along the floorboards as though trying to establish dominance. Your eyes water until you can't tell if you're failing to make a fire or merely weeping about it. Somewhere behind you, a child coughs theatrically, demanding to know if the smoke means breakfast. You snap back that the smoke means suffering, and suffering is the only meal anyone can count on today. The child laughs. Children always laugh when they're not the ones tasked with convincing wet sticks to burst into flame. At last a stubborn ember glows red at the edge of a twig. You lean so close you nearly scorch your eyebrows, coaxing it with soft puffs of breath, terrified and hopeful all at once. The ember flickers, grows, then hesitates. You hold your breath until your lungs ache, as though fear alone will keep it alive. A flame licks upward, small but real, wobbling on its new legs. You shove another twig into place too quickly, and the flame dies with a hiss, leaving nothing but a curl of ash. Your head drops into your hands, the universal prayer of peasants everywhere who have lost yet another round of fire's cruel game. But you try again. You always try again. You rearrange the kindling, peel bark from twigs to expose their drier cores, blow until your lips are chapped and your chest rattles. Minutes stretch into eternities. Your fingers sting. Your knees ache against the cold floor, but finally the glow returns. This time you treat it more carefully, feeding it thin slivers of wood as though raising a nervous chick. A flame catches, then another, and at last the damp log lets out a sharp pop, like a sigh of reluctant surrender. The room glows faintly orange, shadows stretching across walls that moments ago felt as lifeless as stone. You've won. Not a war, not even a battle, but a skirmish. A small victory against stubborn sticks, and that is enough. Outside, the village is already coughing up its own smoke. The baker's chimney belches fitfully, carrying the smell of charred dough and half-sleep. The blacksmith's forge wheezes awake, sparks flying as his apprentice trips over the bellows again. A woman down the lane yells at her husband for feeding damp logs to the fire without stripping the bark, swearing he has the intelligence of a frozen goose. Somewhere a goat sneezes, possibly in solidarity. Fires flicker weakly from every cottage, no two alike, each one a negotiation carried out by tired hands and inventive curses. Your own fire sputters, then steadies, and you sit back on your heels, chest heaving, cheeks flushed with smoke and triumph. The room doesn't exactly grow warm. Warmth is a luxury, not a reality, but the edge of the cold dulls, and that feels like wealth. The straw underfoot no longer bites so sharply. Your fingers twitch with slightly more blood in them, and you almost dare to think of removing one layer of rags. Not yet, not foolishly, but almost. You know this fire will not last long. The logs will burn too quickly, the smoke will settle too thick, and by nightfall, you'll be bargaining again with stubborn wood. Yet in this moment, watching the flames dance, you feel that impossible thing, victory. Not the kind that poets sing about, but the kind that makes your toes sting less and your breath fog softer. Fire is never guaranteed. It is never owed. It is coaxed, argued, begged, bribed, and occasionally cursed into being. But when it arrives, even in its smallest form, it feels like the sun itself has bent down to nod in your direction, and that nod, fleeting and smoky, is enough to keep you going. Blankets are not blankets. Blankets are battlefields. You learn this the first winter you're old enough to understand why your toes feel like frozen turnips by midnight while your older brother somehow sleeps cocooned in 3 layers of warmth that definitely belonged to you yesterday. Every night begins the same way. A truce is declared. Blankets are divided evenly. Promises are muttered about fairness and sharing. And by dawn, you are shivering beneath half a burlap sack, while your sibling has built a fortress worthy of siege engines. It is called the Great Blanket Conspiracy, and it rules your nights more firmly than the king himself. You don't own real blankets, not the kind minstrels sing about or lords boast of in their drafty halls. You own scraps, a cloak patched so many times it looks like it belongs to 7 different people. A strip of burlap once used to haul turnips, still faintly itchy with their ghost. An old bit of cloth so suspiciously furry you're not sure whether it was spun from sheep, goat, or something that crept in from the woods one night and never came back out. Every piece is precious. Every scrap is hoarded, argued over, and sometimes hidden in clever places, like under the straw mattress where mice already conduct their own smuggling ring. At the tavern, gossip spins like wool on a wheel. They say the Lord sleeps under feathers, actual feathers, plucked from swans, stuffed into linen so fine it could blind you with its arrogance. Supposedly, his blanket is so soft he sighs himself to sleep like a babe each night. The story spreads with the same heat as mulled ale. You imagine him up in his manor, wrapped in a feather cloud, while you and every villager you know scrape together anything vaguely cloth-shaped just to keep the cold from gnawing off your kneecaps. People don't hate him for the taxes or the laws. They hate him for the blanket. Evenings are when the real negotiations begin. Families gather around smoky hearths, tossing scraps of fabric into the pile like gamblers adding coins to a pot. Everyone eyes the heap, already planning their nighttime strategy. Who will feign sickness to get the bigger share? Who will wait until everyone's asleep and tug a piece off with the stealth of a cat burglar? You learn quickly that survival is not just about food or fire. It is about blanket politics, and blanket politics are ruthless. Your grandmother insists the secret is layering. She piles one thin cloth after another until she resembles a cabbage left out in the frost. She mutters that it traps heat better, though you notice she still wakes coughing and swatting at invisible drafts. Your cousin swears by sleeping curled so tightly you resemble a snail, blanket or no. Your uncle once claimed he didn't need blankets at all, that his blood was strong enough to fight the cold unaided. They found him the next morning, shivering under the pig trough, muttering apologies to his own knees. He now guards his blanket with the suspicion of a man betrayed by nature itself. Children are the worst offenders. They enter sleep like angels and wake as tyrants, having wrapped themselves in every scrap they could roll over. You try tugging it back, but it's no use. Children cling to warmth, the way drunks cling to dignity. You could wrench until your arms ache and still find only the corner left, damp from someone else's breath. Parents pretend not to notice because they've already hidden their own secret stash. Old shawls, cloaks, sometimes even straw woven tight into a mat. The poor man's quilt. Sometimes, in the dark, a blanket truce is whispered between 2 desperate souls. You can have the top half if I get the bottom. I'll keep the feet warm. You cover the shoulders. These alliances last until someone sneezes or snores or moves an inch too far to the left. Then it's war again. Muffled curses in the night. Silent tug-of-war matches that leave everyone awake and nobody warm. By morning, the blanket lies crumpled in the center of the bed, useless, like a surrendered flag. The wealthiest villagers, those smug few with 2 pigs or a roof that only leaks in 3 places, sometimes flaunt their woolen blankets, though by woolen they mean a heavy mat that smells permanently of sheep. It is itchy enough to leave your skin raw, but still, everyone envies them. Scratch is better than frostbite. When one family in the village inherits a real woven blanket, rumored to be stolen from a caravan decades ago, they guard it like treasure. They don't lend it, don't boast of it, only let whispers of its existence trickle down, so the rest of you can hate them quietly while trying not to imagine what true warmth must feel like. There is, of course, the occasional theft. A blanket vanishes from one cottage and miraculously appears in another, though no one dares confront the thief directly. Instead, glares are exchanged in the square, comments muttered about honesty and Christian virtue, until someone suddenly finds their goat missing in exchange. Blanket theft leads to goat theft to ale theft, and soon half the village is caught in a spiral of vengeance disguised as survival. Winter makes philosophers of some, criminals of most. On the coldest nights, when even the dog refuses to lie by your side and the frost paints your breath into the air like ghosts, the blankets fail entirely. Then you huddle together with whoever you trust most, piling rags over yourselves like a roofless cottage, hoping body heat will do what cloth cannot. You press shoulders, curl knees, ignore the smell of unwashed hair and turnip breath, because warmth matters more than pride. The whispers of the gossiping women at the well say this is how half the village ends up with too many children. But even they admit frost is a crueler fate than scandal. You drift in and out of sleep, tugging what little cover you have closer, bargaining with fate and toes alike. Somewhere in the dark, another family curses, another child cries, another man swears he'll finally kill that draft next summer. You know none of it will change. The cold always returns. The blankets are always too few. The conspiracy never ends. And yet, in the morning, when you wake half frozen but still alive, you realize survival is stitched, not in cloth but in persistence. Blankets may be stolen, fought over, or cursed, but somehow you and everyone else in the village wake again, ready to argue over them one more night. Night in the village is not quiet. It is a negotiation of limbs, a shifting pile of elbows, knees, and snores that could wake the saints themselves. You don't so much go to bed as enter the great contest of positioning, a game without rules or mercy, where the prize is warmth and the penalty is suffocation. The floor creaks beneath the weight of family and livestock, the air heavy with the smell of sweat, straw, and whatever Margaret the pig had for supper. You try not to think about it. You fail. The bed, or what people kindly call a bed, is a single platform of wood covered with straw, flattened into the vague shape of bodies past. If you're lucky, there's a mat or two, stuffed with reeds that poke through the cloth like splinters disguised as comfort. Everyone piles in, one after another, as if hoping to trick the night into thinking there's more bedding than there really island. First your parents, then siblings, then Uncle Oswin, who claims the corner but somehow ends up sprawling diagonally like a man determined to conquer more territory in sleep than he ever managed in life. By the time it's your turn, the only space left is a gap between Oswin's elbow and Margaret, the family pig, who has been promoted to bedmate because her body heat is more reliable than half the humans in the room. You slide into the space with all the grace of a sack of turnips, careful not to disturb the fragile alliances already formed. Someone mutters in their sleep. Someone else coughs directly into your hair. Margaret snorts, shifts, and traps your foot beneath her considerable weight. You tell yourself warmth is worth the smell of pig breath, but when she exhales across your shin, you start doubting. Still, you cling to the heat, like a beggar clutching crumbs, because survival does not care about dignity. The air is thick. Too many bodies in too small a space. The fire in the hearth gave up an hour ago, but the room is its own furnace now, fueled by unwashed socks, the sour tang of onions eaten at supper, and the unmistakable musk of livestock. Uncle Oswin snores with the confidence of a man who has never once cared for the opinions of others. Each exhale rattles like a broken bellows. Every time he shifts, his elbow digs into your ribs, and you wonder if frostbite might not be preferable after all. Children twitch in their dreams. One kicks you squarely in the stomach before rolling over and stealing half the blanket. You tug it back. The child tugs harder, still asleep, eyes fluttering, as if fighting some heroic battle in the dream world. You lose the tug of war. The blanket is gone. Margaret shifts again, sighs, and drools on your ankle. This, you realize grimly, is your lot in life. Pinned beneath an uncle's elbow, robbed by a child, dampened by a pig. The noises never stop. A chorus of snores, coughs, wheezes, the occasional murmur of nonsense words. Someone hums in their sleep. Someone else laughs. You start to suspect the walls are joining in, creaking just enough to remind you they are old and resentful. The smell grows worse. Feet, onions, straw damp with spilled ale, sweat that has had no chance to wash away since midsummer. You breathe shallowly, hoping to inhale less, and nearly suffocate yourself in the attempt. But there are moments, fleeting and traitorous, when the warmth feels almost like comfort. When Margaret's bulk presses against your leg just right, shielding you from the draft that snakes through the cracks in the door. When your sibling, in a rare act of generosity, loosens their grip on the blanket and it slips back over your shoulders. When the rhythm of snores blends into a strange kind of lullaby, absurd and irritating, but steady. In those moments, you drift. Not peacefully, but enough. Dreams come quickly, muddled with the reality of the room. You dream of pigs in feathered cloaks, of uncles with elbows made of iron, of blankets that stretch without end but always slip away the moment you reach for them. You wake when someone rolls onto your arm, leaving it numb and buzzing, and spend 10 minutes wrestling it free without waking the entire bed. You succeed, barely, and lie there with pins and needles stabbing your fingers, staring at the thatch roof above you, and swearing vengeance on whoever invented night. Eventually, the shuffle begins again. A cough becomes a roll becomes a shove. A shove pushes Margaret closer to you until you are pinned against the wall. Your breath fogs against the cold stone, yet your back sweats from the press of her body. You contemplate escape, but where would you go? The floor? Already taken by 2 children and a dog. The hearth? Too cold. And besides, it smells faintly of burned cabbage. Outside? Only if you have a death wish. So you stay, wedged, grumbling in silence. By the time the rooster gives his half-hearted crow, you are more exhausted than when you first lay down. Your hair smells faintly of pig. Your ribs ache from Oswin's elbow. Your pride is somewhere beneath the blanket, which you never saw again after losing it to your siblings' sleep-fueled tyranny. And yet, despite everything, you are alive, not frozen, stiff in the field, not collapsed by the well, not gnawed by frost in the night. Somehow, this chaos works. You rise, stiff, groaning, stumbling over limbs and straw, and tell yourself that tonight will be different. Tonight you will claim a better spot. Keep hold of the blanket. Avoid Margaret's damp sighs. Tonight you will win at human Tetris. And deep down, you know you are lying. It begins with a shiver, the kind that rattles your teeth and creeps down your spine until you start thinking fondly about fire, stew, or even the vague warmth of an angry grandmother's glare. But the fire has already guttered into ash. The stew was gone hours ago, and your grandmother is asleep under 3 layers of shawls, snoring like a distant thunderstorm. That's when someone suggests the old solution. The one villagers don't mention in polite conversation, but rely on every winter. Bring in the animals. At first, you think it's a joke. Dogs, maybe. You've curled up with a mutt or two before, their ribs pressing into yours, their breath foul but at least warm. But goats? Chickens? A cow? Surely no one wants to share a bed with something that smells like it's been rolling in divine punishment. Yet as the cold deepens and the thatch roof whispers its icy complaints, the doors open and the creatures shuffle in like invited guests. The dogs leap onto the straw without hesitation, tails wagging, eyes shining with the smug knowledge that they were always destined to be house royalty. The goat trots in after, bleating with self-importance, as though it's here to enforce the law of warmth. A chicken flaps up to the rafters, half settling, half plotting. Then comes the cow, Gertrude, lumbering with all the grace of a queen who knows you can't say no to her. The air changes immediately. Warmer, yes, but also thicker, saturated with the barnyard perfume of manure, hay, and something wet you don't want to identify. You scoot closer to the sheep, whose wool is like a scratchy cloud, rough enough to take skin off if you move too quickly, but radiating heat like a stubborn Sunday. At first, you hover nervously, wondering if spooning a sheep is a sin, or at least a bad omen. Then the cold bites your toes again, and morality loses the argument. You curl into its side awkwardly, trying to match its breathing. It doesn't protest. If anything, it leans back slightly, like you've been accepted into some strange order of the fleece. The goat is less accommodating. It chooses the center of the room, lays itself down with the determination of a lord taking his rightful chair, and kicks anyone who drifts too close. A child tries, receives a sharp hoof to the shin, and retreats, muttering oaths. The goat resumes, chewing something invisible, staring at the wall like it has profound thoughts about eternity. You wonder if the warmth it provides is worth the bruises. You decide no. The chickens are worse. At first, they seem innocent enough, clucking softly as they settle into corners, their feathers puffed out like pompous pillows. But chickens do not sleep like humans. They startle at shadows, squawk at creaks, and flap their wings whenever someone sneezes. Just as you're drifting into a fragile sleep, one lets out a cry that could raise the dead, followed by frantic flapping that pelts you with straw. The others join in, because panic is contagious, and soon the room is filled with the chaos of feathered nightmares. It subsides eventually, but only after you've sworn eternal hatred toward poultry. And then there's Gertrude. The cow does not ask permission. She lowers herself heavily onto the straw, sighing like an old woman disappointed by the world. Her warmth is unmatched, a furnace in a hide. Families press closer, grateful, until someone remembers that cows, unlike humans, are not subtle in their digestion. It starts with a rumble, a sound that makes the straw vibrate. Then the air shifts. A great gust of something pungent fills the room, and you are left blinking in the dark, trying to decide if this is survivable or if you'd rather freeze outside. Someone coughs, someone swears, someone else mutters a prayer. You, desperate, convince yourself it smells almost like incense, holy smoke from the heavens. If you repeat it often enough, maybe you'll believe it. The dogs, at least, are loyal. They tuck themselves against you, warm bellies pressed to your side, tails occasionally thumping your leg. Their paws twitch as they chase rabbits in dreams, claws scraping against your shin. But you forgive them because their heat is steady. You bury your nose in their fur, ignoring the flea bites, and tell yourself it's almost cozy. By the middle of the night, you've learned the unspoken hierarchy of animal bedfellows. Sheep are the best, soft and steady, content to let you steal their warmth so long as you don't tug their ears. Dogs are nearly as good, though prone to stealing your spot if you shift away for even a second. Goats are tyrants, kings of the straw who give nothing freely and demand space as tribute. Chickens are saboteurs, unpredictable agents of chaos who guarantee you'll never truly sleep. And cows, magnificent but hazardous, are both saviors and destroyers, a furnace wrapped in leather with a smell that could end civilizations. Sleep comes in fits. You wake when a dog kicks, when a chicken squawks, when Gertrude shifts and nearly flattens someone's foot. You dream of feathers, hooves, wool, of trying to juggle animals into neat arrangements that never hold. In one dream, you host a feast where all the animals are guests, sitting politely at a long table, wearing cloaks and speaking Latin. You wake with feathers in your mouth and the goat chewing your sleeve. Morning creeps in slowly, gray light seeping through cracks in the wall. The animals stir before the people. The chickens cluck like gossips, eager to spread news. The goat rises and shakes itself as though it has conquered the night. The dogs stretch and wag, demanding scraps for their service. Gertrude lingers, lying heavy and content, refusing to rise until prodded. You peel yourself from the sheep, your face imprinted with ridges of wool, your hair matted with hay. You feel warmer than you deserve, alive despite the frost, and you know it wasn't the blankets or the fire that saved you. It was the beasts, drafted into your household army, unwilling saints of the night. You smell like them, you ache from them, but you survived because of them. And as you step outside into the brittle air, you know one thing with certainty. Tonight, when the cold prowls back, you will be spooning the sheep again. Your feet have already given up on dignity. They're lumps of flesh that exist purely to ache, sting, and collect frost like some cursed prize. Socks are whispered about, mythical objects said to exist in castles, worn by lords who have never once stepped in manure while chasing a runaway goose. For you, socks are about as real as unicorns, though slightly less believable. You make do, as always, with whatever's at hand, or more accurately, whatever's at foot. Straw is the obvious choice. You cram handfuls of it down into your cracked boots until it pokes out the sides, scratching your ankles and making you feel like a scarecrow who wandered away from his post. The warmth is questionable. At first it feels like insulation, but after a few minutes it shifts, bends, and arranges itself into something that seems deliberately designed to stab you. Still, you endure, because frostbite seems worse than splinters. Others in the family go with rags. Old shirts, worn-out skirts, anything with fibers left is torn into strips and wound around toes. It works for a time, until the cloth gets damp, which is usually within 10 minutes because your boots are less footwear and more sponges pretending to be leather. You peel the rags off at night, stiff with cold and smelling faintly of despair, and hang them near the fire in the vain hope that tomorrow they won't feel like frozen eels. Your cousin, the one who insists on calling himself inventive when everyone else calls him foolish, takes a different route. He announces proudly that moss is nature's sock. He says this while stuffing his feet into a pair of green, damp clumps freshly scraped from the north side of a tree. For 5 minutes, he struts about, proclaiming the superior cushioning, the natural aroma, the way the moss hugs his toes like a mother's embrace. Then he slips on the frozen mud, goes sprawling, and the moss detaches, sliding out of his boots like it too has rejected him. By evening, his feet are raw and red, and he mutters something about betrayal. No one comforts him. Some swear by stuffing their shoes with porridge cloths, the same ones used to strain yesterday's gruel. It's a gamble. If the cloths were properly wrung out, they're merely stiff and unpleasant. If not, the moisture freezes against your skin, and suddenly your toes feel like they're being gnawed by tiny ice demons. You try it once, decide you'd rather risk death than soggy oatmeal toes, and never look back. The real secret, everyone knows, is circulation. Keep moving, keep stomping, keep pretending your walk to the well is a march to glory. When you sit too long, the cold creeps in and begins to negotiate with your extremities. It always wins. You've seen it in others. The gray skin, the quiet wincing, the toes that blacken and vanish. You wonder sometimes if frostbite is just the body's way of delivering a very blunt message. Invest in shoes. Shoes, of course, are their own problem. Yours were cobbled together 3 winters ago by a man who may or may not have been sober at the time. The left one pinches, the right one flaps, and both let in more water than they keep out. The soles are so thin you can feel every rock, every root, every frozen clump of earth mocking you. You tell yourself they've got character. Everyone else tells you to stop complaining. At night, you peel off whatever improvised protection you've chosen and hold your feet to the fire. They steam like boiled turnips, the skin blotched red, the nails threatening rebellion. You watch the smoke curl upward and wonder if you'll wake tomorrow with fewer toes than you went to bed with. The old woman near the well claims she once lost 3 in a single night and still manages to outwalk most of the village. You don't know if it's true or if she's just trying to frighten you, but either way, you wriggle your feet more aggressively, daring the cold to try. Children, of course, seem immune. They run barefoot through the frost, toes blue, laughing as though pain is just another game. You watch one boy kick a frozen clod of dirt until it breaks apart, then limp away like a conquering hero. You're not sure if you admire him or think he's an idiot. Possibly both. When you finally crawl under the blankets, what few of them exist, you tuck your feet between bodies, hiding them like shameful secrets. A sibling kicks you, an uncle grunts, the goat sneezes, but you persist. Human warmth, animal warmth, anything is better than leaving them exposed to the night. You drift off with toes pressed against someone's calf, praying you'll wake with them still attached. Morning is always the test. You shove your feet back into whatever mixture of straw, rags, or damp moss you've cobbled together and take the first steps into the frozen day. If they sting, you're alive. If they don't, you panic. That's the cruel trick of the cold. It convinces you you're fine just before it takes something permanent. So you stomp harder, wiggle more, and swear loudly enough to warm yourself by sheer irritation. Socks are for the wealthy, the lords in their feather beds, the ladies who sip wine beside roaring fires. For you, socks are straw, rags, porridge cloths, moss, anything you can shove between your skin and the frost. You curse them, you laugh at them, you live by them. And as your breath fogs in the air and your toes curl inside their makeshift prisons, you know this is survival. Awkward, itchy, smelly survival. But survival all the same. The tavern door groans open, releasing a puff of smoke, laughter, and the unmistakable perfume of spilt ale mixed with sweat and onions. You step inside, chasing warmth that feels more promise than fact. The hearth is smoking like it's being punished. The benches sag under the weight of half the village, and the air is thick with voices raised to shout over the racket of a man who has decided that tonight is the night he will sing, even though everyone wishes he wouldn't. You settle in, hands numb, cheeks burning, eyes watering, and someone shoves a mug into your grip before you even manage a proper greeting. Ale is survival in liquid form, or at least that's the story the tavern keeper tells while happily refilling mugs. It's bitter, flat, warm in the wrong way, and yet it slides down your throat like salvation itself. After the first gulp, your chest tingles. After the second, your fingers thaw enough to wiggle. By the third, you're laughing at a joke that doesn't deserve it, and you've forgotten that your feet are stuffed with straw and regret. The cold is still out there, but the ale convinces you it can be bargained with, that maybe you're friends now, and that's always the first lie. The men at the table to your left are arguing loudly over whether a sheep could survive wearing boots. One insists it would, proudly declaring he once put his own on a goat as an experiment. The other says the goat just stood still out of shock, and besides, the boots weren't his to lend. You listen, fascinated, until someone sloshes ale over your sleeve, pats you on the back, and demands to know whether you think snow has flavor. You answer yes, confidently, though you're not sure why. It doesn't take long for the tavern to fill with stories, as ale always has a way of loosening both tongues and imaginations. The old man near the hearth tells of a cousin who fell asleep face first in a snowdrift and woke up in spring, still smiling, though no one ever confirmed the truth because he never said a word again. Another swears he saw a man chase off frostbite by drinking a gallon of ale in one sitting, though the man in question later forgot his own name for a week. These stories pass around like bread at a feast, thin, unbelievable, but strangely nourishing all the same. The warmth spreads from your stomach to your limbs, convincing you that you are no longer a fragile creature made of bones and shivers, but a furnace of confidence. You slap the table harder, laugh louder, nod at things you don't understand. For 2 hours, the cold is a distant rumor, the wind just a sound you used to fear. Ale solves nothing, but for a brief golden span, it makes everything feel solved, and that's nearly as good. But ale is a fickle ally. Too much, and the room tilts. The benches wobble. The hearth fire grows teeth and stares back. You watch someone stand on a table and declare himself king of the village, only to tumble into a puddle of spilled drink and groans. Someone else laughs so hard they choke on their own bread. The tavern is a carnival of poor decisions, everyone encouraged by the fact that the more you drink, the less you feel the draft creeping through the cracked shutters. Inevitably, the night ends the same way it always does, with someone staggering outside to relieve themselves, then deciding that the snow looks softer than the straw bed waiting at home. You've seen them in the morning, half buried, limbs poking out like broken fence posts, faces slack but oddly content, as if frozen bliss is better than sober misery. People shake their heads, drag them back inside, and tell the story for years. It becomes a warning, but also a badge of honor. To drink so much you nearly married death is foolish, yes, but it makes for the kind of tale that earns respect around a fire. You feel it yourself as you stumble out, air biting at your ears, the night a vast pit of silence, broken only by your own uneven breathing. The ale tells you you're invincible, that the cold is a lover, that lying down for just a moment won't hurt. But another voice, older, quieter, whispers that if you do, you won't wake again. You sway in the snow, caught between foolishness and survival, until a neighbor slaps you on the shoulder and mutters, "Move, you idiot," dragging you back to motion. The walk home is uneven. Every step feels like both triumph and threat. Your boots slip, your knees wobble, your head hums like a beehive. The cold claws back through the cracks the ale tried to seal. By the time you push open the cottage door, the warmth of the tavern has dissolved into memory, leaving behind only a sticky tongue, a buzzing skull, and the faint but undeniable comfort that, for a while, you beat the frost with laughter. You collapse onto the crowded bed, still smelling of smoke and spilt ale, elbowing someone in the ribs as you wrestle for space. A dog growls, a child kicks, the pig shifts closer for warmth. Your breath fogs, your head spins, and you smile despite yourself. Ale is no blanket, no fire, no miracle cure, but it gives you courage. It gives you stories, and sometimes, on the coldest nights, that feels like enough. The idea arrives the way most bad ideas do, confidently, loudly, and from a man who hasn't been right about anything since midsummer. He stands in the middle of the cottage, waving an onion like it's a holy relic, and declares that salvation from the cold comes not from fire, nor blankets, nor divine mercy, but from rubbing the thing across your chest until your skin weeps tears of its own. You watch, skeptical. But desperation makes fools of entire villages, and tonight is colder than even the rooster's feathers can withstand. The man slices the onion. The smell rises like a ghost, and before anyone can protest, he's already greasing himself in layers of pungent hope. Soon others join, not because they believe, but because ridicule is better than frostbite. You find yourself holding half an onion, staring at your chest as if it's about to sign a contract. The first touch stings, sharp and sour, but but the warmth is immediate. Or maybe it's just the pain tricking your brain into thinking something useful is happening. Either way, the room fills with groans, coughs, and declarations that, yes, this is working. By God, it's working. While the smell grows so thick you're certain it will cling to your soul for generations. The children laugh at first, pointing and gagging, but soon they're pressed into service, dabbing smaller onions on their own arms like miniature healers. Even the pig, dragged in for warmth, sneezes violently, eyes wide with betrayal. The dog slinks to the corner, whining, as if to say it didn't sign up for this particular form of survival. By the time you're finished, the entire household reeks like a soup pot gone feral, but there's a strange sense of unity in it. If you're going to stink, at least you stink together. Not everyone stops at rubbing. A cousin insists that real heat comes from within, and so he chews cloves of garlic like they're sugared almonds. His breath could kill a crow in flight, but he claims he feels fire in his belly, warmth blooming from his throat to his toes. Another neighbor, not to be outdone, gulps down raw onion slices, eyes streaming, swearing the tears are proof of demons fleeing his body. You're not sure about demons, but his wife moves to the far side of the room and refuses to share a blanket, so perhaps something was exorcised after all. The gossip spreads faster than the smell. By the next day, half the village reeks of allium and pride. Old women at the well argue over whether the cure should be applied clockwise or counterclockwise, while a man with no onions of his own rubs turnip juice across his chest and insists it feels nearly the same. Children chase each other through the square with garlic necklaces, pretending to ward off both frost and vampires. Though no one has ever seen a vampire and only one child has seen Frost up close without boots, and he still refuses to talk about it. There are, of course, consequences. The baker refuses to open his shop one morning because the air inside tastes of onion before the door even shuts. The priest coughs his way through Vespers, blessing the congregation with watery eyes, while secretly praying for divine intervention against the stench. A merchant passing through refuses to stop for the night, claiming the smell is a sign of plague, and rides on to the next village, leaving behind a cloud of judgment and a very confused donkey. But the villagers, undeterred, swear they feel warmer. Maybe it's the onion. Maybe it's just the satisfaction of suffering collectively. Maybe it's delirium. At night, lying shoulder to shoulder on the crowded bed, the air is thick enough to chew. You bury your nose in the blanket and wonder if this is what death smells like. Your cousin beside you snores with such vigor that the fumes rise in gusts, stinging your eyes, but you admit grudgingly that you do feel warmer. The cold is still there, lurking at the door and pressing through the cracks, but it seems less triumphant, less victorious. It has to fight through layers of onion, garlic, sweat, and stubbornness. And perhaps even winter has its limits. The next morning, the rooster refuses to crow. He just stares down at the yard with narrowed eyes, feathers fluffed in visible disgust. Even the animals seem reluctant to share space. Chickens roost outside despite the cold. Goats press their faces to the snow rather than the air inside, and the cow bellows so loudly it shakes frost from the roof beams. Still, the people persist. The onion cure is no longer just a trick. It's a ritual. To stop now would be to admit defeat, and that is colder than the frost itself. Days pass, each one thick with the perfume of your collective determination. A man carves a small talisman shaped like an onion bulb and wears it around his neck as a charm against the freeze. A woman sings to her garlic cloves before swallowing them, convinced the songs make the warmth stronger. A child tries to sell pre-rubbed onions to passers-by for a penny, claiming they're blessed by the blacksmith's fire, though the only blessing involved was the blacksmith kicking him out of the forge. You know it's madness, but you also know it's survival. Not the kind written in noble chronicles or sung about by minstrels, but the stubborn, smelly sort that leaves you alive to complain another day. You catch yourself grinning through the tears streaming down your face, The onions sting sharp and constant, and realize the frost hasn't claimed you yet. And that, in its own foul, fragrant way, is victory. The porridge is not food so much as a presence. It sits in the pot, bubbling in slow defiance of everything you've ever believed about oats, water, and the natural order of texture. You ladle it into bowls with the solemnity of a priest distributing relics, knowing this mass of gray sustenance will not only fill your stomach, but keep your fingers from snapping off in the night. The bowl is hot, the steam stings your nose, and the porridge itself could probably patch a roof if left unattended. Yet, as you hold it close, you feel its heavy warmth seep into your bones. For a moment, you almost forgive its taste, which is somewhere between bark and despair. The first bite is always the worst. Thick, gluey, and hotter than any fire could justify, it clings to your tongue like an overly affectionate leech. You blow on it. You stir it. You whisper prayers into it, but still it scorches you, and still you return for another mouthful, because nothing else stands between you and the frost that waits outside. Across the room, the family sits with steaming bowls in their hands, each one bent over like monks in silent meditation. No one speaks, not because of reverence, but because opening your mouth means the heat escapes, and no one is willing to risk that. The porridge never ends. You could swear you ate 3 bowls last night, yet the pot remains as full as ever, simmering with smug persistence. It changes slightly with each reheating. Thicker, darker, more sentient, perhaps, but it never reduces. A lump sticks to the ladle, like a stubborn barnacle, refusing to dislodge no matter how hard you shake. You poke it with your finger once, and it jiggles in a way that makes you uneasy. Some whisper it's been the same porridge for years, just topped up with water and oats as needed, a kind of culinary immortality that no saint would approve. Still, it serves more purposes than one. You wrap your hands around the bowl, savoring the heat even as the contents threaten to scald through the wood. Children clutch theirs like precious treasure, using them to thaw fingers numb from chores. A man once pressed his bowl against his toes in desperation, only to discover porridge works better as insulation than footwear. Someone else, more creative or more mad, flattened a slab into a sort of pillow, insisting it held warmth better than straw. No one argued. No one lay too close either, because the smell of fermented oats in your hair is a punishment no one deserves. Fights have broken out over the porridge. Not over who gets the last bowl, that would imply it ever ended, but over who gets the least lumpy serving, or who receives the spoon that doesn't smell faintly of goat. One cousin once swung a bowl like a weapon, and the porridge within held so firm that the entire clump flew across the room, striking an uncle on the head and leaving him stunned but oddly warm. Ever since, porridge bowls have doubled as both dinnerware and defense, a medieval innovation that could probably withstand siege warfare. And then there are the nights when things turn strange. A spoon sinks into the pot and meets resistance, not from oats but from something far more stubborn. You stir harder, sweat dripping despite the cold, and feel the porridge push back. A ripple crosses its surface, though no one touched it. Someone laughs nervously, claims it's just steam, but the room grows quiet, every eye watching the pot as though waiting for it to speak. One night, an old aunt swore she heard a low growl, deep and bubbling, rising with the steam like a warning. She crossed herself 3 times, muttered a blessing, and ate her bowl anyway because hunger trumps fear every time. It becomes a kind of legend. Children whisper that the porridge remembers every hand that stirred it, every mouth that's eaten it. They say it thickens not from oats but from grudges, heavy with the weight of 1,000 reheats. When someone asks what it actually tastes like, the best answer anyone gives is history. And still you eat, because nothing else fills you so thoroughly. Nothing else lingers in your belly like a furnace made of glue. Even the cow eyes the pot with suspicion, as if aware that, given the right circumstances, porridge could outlive them all. One brutal evening, when the frost cracks wood beams and the wind howls like wolves denied their supper, you sit before the fire with your bowl and swear the porridge is warmer than the flames. It clings to your spoon, stretches in slow strings, and smells faintly of something you can't quite place. Smoke, sweat, maybe defiance itself. You scoop another bite, ignoring the way it sticks to your teeth, and realize survival has a taste. It's not pleasant, it's not noble, but it's thick, stubborn, and utterly unforgettable. And tonight, that is enough. The fire pit smolders, coughing up more smoke than heat, and yet the benches around it fill anyway. You shuffle in with the others, not because you expect your toes to thaw, but because you know this is where warmth actually lives, in the mouths of villagers who can turn a whisper into a bonfire. The flames crack weakly, the logs sigh as if they'd rather be anything else, and still the air pulses with a heat that has nothing to do with fire. Someone clears their throat, someone else leans in too close, and suddenly the square glows brighter than it has all winter. The first rumor comes lightly, tossed like a twig into the embers. The blacksmith's wife, someone says, was seen near the mill at twilight, and she wasn't alone. The sentence hangs in the air, steaming, daring someone else to pick it up. They do. Of course she wasn't, adds another voice. Who goes anywhere alone after dark? The mill is haunted. She had to bring someone. Except it wasn't her husband, was it? A low hum rises from the crowd, half laughter, half suspicion. The fire crackles approvingly, or maybe it just collapsed in sympathy. You hold your hands out, not toward the pit, but toward the circle of talk. It really is warmer here, though not in any way that can be measured. Every nod, every gasp, every sharp intake of breath pushes the cold back an inch. A girl leans forward, eyes wide, scarf slipping down to reveal flushed cheeks. "I heard," she begins, and that alone is enough to draw everyone closer. It doesn't matter what she heard. Lost chickens, stolen carrots, secret letters, because the telling is the warmth. You listen, not even caring that your feet are numb, because numbness fades when scandal sparks. Soon the topics multiply. The baker's apprentice didn't show up for prayers. The priest stumbled out of the tavern, muttering about saints with suspiciously red cheeks. Someone swears they saw the reeve talking to himself in the field, though the official story is he was scolding a goat. You watch faces brighten, shoulders loosen, even laughter spill out like steam from a kettle. People don't realize it, but gossip is central heating with no wood required. You feel your own blood move faster, though whether it's excitement or survival, you can't be sure. There's an art to it, this communal blaze. Too much detail and you sound like a liar. Too little and you risk being dismissed. The best gossips strike a balance. Just enough truth to make the lie believable. Just enough lie to make the truth unbearable. Old Bertha, wrapped in shawls like a fortress, delivers her lines with the rhythm of a blacksmith's hammer. The cooper's barrels aren't the only thing she's been filling, she mutters, and half the crowd inhales sharply, while the other half wheezes laughter into their sleeves. It doesn't matter who she means. Everyone decides they know, and that certainty is as warm as any hearth. The children listen too, though they pretend not to. They crouch at the edge of the circle, pretending to poke sticks in the embers, but their ears twitch at every mention of scandal. Tomorrow, they'll carry these stories back to their games, reenacting them with chickens, goats, and whatever imagination allows. Even the animals feel the heat. A dog lingers near the benches, wagging as if it knows its owner is the subject of the latest tale. The gossip turns personal, as it always does when the night stretches too long. Someone nudges you, asks too loudly if you've fixed that draft in your cottage yet, or if you've been too busy eyeing the brewer's daughter. Laughter ripples, sharp but not cruel, and you realize embarrassment works like kindling. Your cheeks burn hotter than your hands ever could. You stammer a reply, but no one hears it. They're already moving on, tossing another rumor into the fire before your dignity can recover. By now, the flames in the pit have sunk low, reduced to red coals that glow like embarrassed cheeks. No one minds. The real blaze crackles in mouths, in eyes, in the quick exchange of words that make the night feel less endless. A woman swears her cousin once survived a blizzard just by talking non-stop about other people's marriages. A man insists that's exactly what's happening now, and everyone laughs so loudly the cold sulks away for a moment. The gossip burns longest in the silences that follow. A rumor dropped casually into the circle lingers long after the teller has gone home. The words nest in your ears, warming you all the way back to your cottage. And when you lie down on your stiff straw mattress, you replay them like a lullaby. You may not have enough firewood, or blankets, or socks, but you do have something to talk about tomorrow, and in this village, that is survival. The ritual begins before dawn, when the air inside the cottage has teeth, and the floor greets your bare feet with the bite of an enemy. You stand in front of the small pile of clothing you own, staring at it as though it might reveal some secret combination that finally defeats the cold. First comes the linen shirt, thin and scratchy, already patched in 3 places. Then another, because you've learned one layer of linen is like spitting into a blizzard. The wool tunic goes next, rough and heavy, smelling faintly of sheep and the sweat of every chore you've ever done in it. Another tunic follows, less wool than mystery fibers, but warm enough when layered. Then the cloak, then the other cloak, then the hat that may once have been a hat but now looks more like an animal that died on your head and stayed there out of loyalty. By the time you are finished, you resemble a cabbage, a very cold cabbage. Your arms barely bend, your knees groan every time you try to sit, and when you reach for a spoon, your sleeve dips into the porridge because your body no longer belongs to you. The weight is immense, a burden you willingly shoulder, because to walk outside with fewer than 5 layers is to court death. You clomp toward the door, shoulders stiff, wool rasping against wool, the sound like sandpaper conducting a hymn. Every step is a negotiation between warmth and mobility. You are warm enough to walk, but not warm enough to walk with dignity. The arguments start the moment you step outside. Your neighbor insists linen should always be closest to the skin, then wool, then more linen, then more wool, like stacking protective rings against the devil's breath. Another villager scoffs, declaring that wool against bare skin is the only way to trap heat properly. You stand there, already sweating in your cabbage armor, wondering if it even matters when the wind cuts through both methods with the precision of a knife. The debate grows heated, as though someone's eternal soul depends on the order of their undergarments, and for a brief moment, you all forget that your teeth are clattering hard enough to rattle your jaw. The wind, of course, settles the matter. It sweeps down the lane, wicked and gleeful, rushing beneath hems, up sleeves, through every seam your grandmother ever stitched. Linen, wool, wool over linen, linen over wool. None of it matters. When the wind laughs in your face, sneaking icy fingers down your collar, you stagger forward, muttering curses, clutching your layers closer. Somewhere behind you, a child bundled in rags waddles like a duck, arms out to keep balance, laughing because children don't know they're supposed to suffer. You watch him tumble into the snow and bounce back up, unharmed, as though layers are simply a game, not the only thing keeping your bones from snapping like twigs. The cabbage resemblance is inescapable. You waddle into the square, arms stiff, body swollen with fabric, and everyone else looks the same. Dozens of cabbages milling about, muttering greetings, heads swaddled in shawls, hands lost in sleeves. It is hard to recognize your neighbors like this, so you rely on voices, and even those come muffled. Someone waves at you, though it takes a moment to realize they are not actually waving, but trying to dislodge a sleeve that has swallowed their hand whole. Another villager sneezes, and their hat shifts so dramatically you can see only their nose, red and dripping, peeking out from the folds. The ritual extends beyond practicality. There is ceremony to it, superstition even. A woman near the well claims her grandmother always began with the left arm first when layering to trick the cold into chasing the wrong limb. A man insists you must never wear an even number of cloaks because the frost favors symmetry. Your uncle swears his layering technique saved him during the Great Freeze of '62, though others point out he also lost 3 toes that year, so perhaps his method isn't worth imitating. Yet still, the ritual persists, practiced each morning with devotion, as though fabric alone could bargain with winter. By midday, you are sweating beneath the layers, skin damp, but removing even one piece feels impossible. To peel off a cloak is to invite the cold to crawl under all the others, to nest in your chest and stay there. So you endure, trapped inside your own heat, until the air changes and the sweat begins to chill, making you shiver anew. You wonder briefly if the cold and the sweat have conspired against you, a double assault designed to remind you that comfort is a luxury peasants do not deserve. Evening brings its own complications. The layers that once protected you now must be peeled off carefully, each one stiff with frost or damp with effort. It becomes another family ritual. One by one, garments are tugged free, shaken out, hung near the fire to steam like reluctant vegetables. The room fills with the smell of damp wool and smoke, pungent and heavy, clinging to your nose. You lie back in your remaining shirt, shivering again, wondering how something so heavy could leave you feeling so bare. Tomorrow morning, the ritual will begin again, as endless as the frost. In the end, the layering isn't about warmth so much as endurance. The clothes do little more than trick your mind into thinking you are armored, that you are ready for the onslaught of ice and wind. You resemble a cabbage, yes, but a cabbage that has survived another day, and that counts for something. You mutter a prayer of thanks, not to the saints or the king or even the sun, but to the humble scraps of wool and linen that have shielded you one more night. And as you drift into uneasy sleep, you wonder what it might feel like to wear a single layer of silk in summer, light as a sigh, cool against the skin, a dream as distant and unreachable as warmth itself. The night is a fragile thing, stitched together from snoring, shivering, and the faint crackle of a fire that has already lost its courage. You lie in the dark beneath blankets too thin to deserve the name, wedged between relatives who twitch and mutter like conspirators in their sleep. For a moment you almost manage to drift, half dreaming of warmer places that probably don't exist. And then it happens. The unmistakable, traitorous pressure. Your bladder decides it no longer cares for survival. It demands release, and it demands it now. You curse it silently, willing it to reconsider, bargaining with the stubborn organ as if it might be persuaded by reason. Leaving the bed is unthinkable. The air outside the covers is colder than any sin you've ever committed. To peel back the blanket is to invite death to climb in, frost-fingered and smug. Yet the pressure builds, relentless. You hold on, squirming slightly, earning an annoyed grunt from your uncle, who tightens his grip on the blanket as though punishing you for daring to need anything at all. Finally, with a sigh heavy enough to disturb the pig at your feet, you accept the inevitable. The chamber pot ballet begins. The chamber pot sits in the corner, lurking like an executioner. Its surface is colder than steel, colder than regret, colder even than the well at dawn. You shuffle toward it, every step a betrayal of your own body's desperate desire to remain wrapped in warmth. The floor bites through your socks, if you're lucky enough to even have socks tonight, and the straw crunches underfoot like brittle bones. You carry the pot back toward the bed, hissing as your fingers meet its icy rim, colder than the air itself. Holding it feels like clutching a block of winter's heart. There is no dignity in what follows. You perch awkwardly, hunched and shivering, trying to finish quickly before the cold chews through your bones entirely. Your breath fogs the air, swirling around the pot like a taunt. Somewhere nearby, someone stirs and mutters, "Quiet down," as though relieving yourself at midnight is an act of public disturbance. You resist the urge to hurl the pot at their head. When you're done, you return it carefully to its corner, hoping to avoid disaster. But disaster is inevitable. Perhaps it's a child kicking in their sleep. Perhaps it's your cousin stumbling in the dark, half dreaming, flailing for balance. Perhaps it's you, too weary to place it firmly enough. At some point in the night, someone always manages to knock the pot over. The sound is unmistakable, a hollow clatter, a slosh that freezes time itself. And then the groan of everyone in the bed as reality sinks in. You squeeze your eyes shut, praying it's a dream, but the smell rises quickly, proof that fate is crueler than imagination. Voices grumble, curses fly, someone insists it wasn't their fault, and the accused swears they were asleep, therefore innocent. None of it matters. The floor is damp now, the air thick with ammonia and recrimination. You lie awake, plotting vengeance. If it was your cousin, you'll hide his boots come morning. If it was your uncle, you'll feed his blanket to the goat. If it was the child, well, children are untouchable, but you can glare at them hard enough to leave a mark. The anger keeps you warm, at least, hotter than the embers in the hearth. You imagine elaborate punishments involving snowdrifts, icy water, perhaps tying someone outside with only a tunic, while the frost teaches them humility. The fantasies grow darker until finally you exhaust yourself with your own creativity. But sleep refuses to return easily. You lie there in the stink, blankets pulled high, listening to the others muttering and sighing, all of you united in shared misery. The cold presses down, heavier than the cloth on your shoulders, but you refuse to move again. Better to lose toes to frost than to make another trip to the pot. You vow never to drink so much ale before bed again, though you know you'll break that promise tomorrow. You always do. By dawn, the pot sits sullen in its corner, its contents stiffened by frost, glistening like an obscene sculpture. The first unlucky soul assigned to empty it will carry it through the village, trying to look dignified while everyone knows exactly what it contains. You hope it isn't you, though odds are it will be. The air outside bites cruelly, but at least it will mask the smell. The well will steam faintly as the contents are dumped, and the day will begin anew, everyone pretending to forget what happened in the dark. And yet you know tonight it will happen again. Tonight someone will rise, shuffle, curse the air, clutch the freezing rim, and pray for quickness. Tonight someone will kick the pot, spill its secrets, and condemn you all to another hour of foul air and muttered vengeance. The chamber pot ballet never ends, a performance repeated night after night, as reliable as the cold itself. Survival is measured not by warmth or comfort, but by how much humiliation you can endure without snapping. You roll over, dragging the blanket tighter around you, and watch the gray light creep across the rafters. You survived another night, though not without scars. You survived the cold, the stink, the indignity, and even the fury that kept you awake. Tomorrow, you'll curse it all again, but for now, you let yourself drift into the shallow comfort of knowing that, somehow, the dance goes on. The forge glows like a beacon in the frost, its smoke rising in a steady column that every villager recognizes as the one reliable sign of warmth. The blacksmith himself is already hammering at dawn, muscles shining with sweat that steams into the air, while the rest of the village shuffles around in cabbage-layered misery. It doesn't take long for people to invent excuses. A hoe that suddenly needs fixing, a scythe that allegedly cracked, a pot that may or may not have ever existed but is definitely dented now. By mid-morning, half the village has business at the forge, each one lingering longer than necessary, all of them pretending this is about tools and not survival. You join the line with your own excuse, carrying a rusted knife you found in the straw pile and declaring with the gravest expression that it must be sharpened or the harvest will surely fail. The blacksmith doesn't argue. He doesn't need to. He knows the truth, as does everyone else standing too close to his fire, faces red, eyes watering, layers slowly peeling away in the heat. The forge has become winter's luxury spa, a communal sauna without privacy or shame. The heat is intoxicating. You sink onto a bench near the embers, stretching out fingers that have been stiff for weeks, watching them loosen as blood rushes back with painful tingles. Your toes wiggle inside boots that finally feel less like coffins. Sweat drips down your neck, clinging to the wool layers you swore you'd never remove but now consider stripping off entirely. Around you, villagers sigh like sinners absolved, groaning softly, eyes closing in bliss. Someone mutters that this must be what heaven feels like, though heaven probably smells less of iron and singed hair. The blacksmith hammers, each strike ringing like a church bell, though no one is paying attention to his artistry. Every eye is on the glowing coals, the sparks that leap like golden insects, the waves of heat that roll across the room. People edge closer, closer still, until one woman yelps as her cloak smolders, the wool curling into smoke. She beats it out with her hands, embarrassed, but two others quickly slip into the space she vacated, pressing nearer to the fire with shameless greed. The forge is no place for dignity. Conversations rise, half to distract from the awkward intimacy of sweating together, half to justify staying longer. A farmer insists his plow blade is nearly ruined, though everyone knows he hasn't touched his field since the frost arrived. Another swears he's here to order nails, though he has no timber and no plans to build anything. You nod along, presenting your dull knife, though really you just want to keep sitting until your bones melt into the bench. The blacksmith accepts each lie with the patience of a man who knows warmth is the only currency stronger than coin. By midday, the forge resembles less a workplace and more a gathering hall. People fan themselves with scraps of cloth, cheeks flushed, hair plastered to their foreheads, but no one leaves. Children dart between legs, faces shiny with sweat, daring each other to touch the anvil until one actually does and yelps loud enough to rattle the rafters. The dogs have gathered too, flopping in the doorway, tongues lolling, basking in the spill of heat. Even the goat sneaks in, chewing on a discarded rag, bleeding like it belongs to this strange congregation. The air grows thick. Breathing feels like drinking stew, heavy and hot, yet you gulp it down greedily. Your wool tunic clings to your back, your undershirt sticks, and you imagine you can feel your own layers fusing into one giant garment. Someone jokes that you all look like roast geese, glistening and overdone, and laughter ripples through the sweat-soaked crowd. It is delirious laughter, born of too much heat after too much cold, the kind that makes you wonder if you've survived or simply gone mad. Eventually, someone leaves, staggering outside into the icy wind, steam rising from their head like a saint's halo. The blast of air that follows them is so sharp it silences the forge. Everyone briefly reminded that outside is waiting, hungry. You feel it too, a chill clawing at your sweat-damp skin, and you huddle closer to the fire, as if sheer will can delay the inevitable. You tell yourself you'll leave soon, after your knife is sharpened, after your fingers stop tingling, after you've had just one more breath of warmth. But the truth is, you'll cling to this forge until the blacksmith himself throws you out. When at last you do stumble back into the square, the cold slams into you like a wall. The sweat on your skin freezes instantly, turning your moment of bliss into a new kind of misery. Your hat stiffens, your cloak crackles with frost, your body shudders violently. And yet, beneath the shock, there is still a lingering glow, a memory of fire that keeps you upright. You know you'll return tomorrow with another excuse, another broken tool or dented pan, because the forge is the only place in this winter where life feels possible. You trudge home, knife still dull, fingers stiff again, breath white in the air. You curse the cold, curse the layers, curse the frost that mocks every effort. But you smile anyway, because you know where the real hearth of the village lies. Not in your cottage, not in the tavern, not even in your own fire pit. It's here, in the blacksmith's forge, where you all sit together sweating and laughing and pretending it's about work. Survival, it turns out, sometimes smells like smoke and iron. You hear them before you feel them. Tiny scritches in the straw, faint pattering across the floorboards, the sound of something alive and shameless making itself at home. At first you tell yourself it's nothing, just the wind scratching, or the pig shifting, or your uncle's toes dragging along the planks. But then there's the unmistakable brush of fur against your ankle, light as a whisper, and you know the mice are back. Mice are never truly gone, not in winter, not in your cottage. They move like rumors, small, persistent, and always at the worst time. In summer, you curse them for chewing grain sacks, for leaving droppings in the bread bin, for scampering across your toes when you're trying to sleep. But in winter, the hatred dulls, because mice, for all their theft and audacity, are also little furnaces with legs. The first time you notice one crawl under the blanket, you freeze, convinced it's come to gnaw your flesh. Then you feel it curl near your shin, warm and shivering, and you hesitate. Do you scream? Do you kill it? Do you throw it across the room and risk losing the only patch of heat you've found all night? The moral dilemma is overwhelming, but your toes are blocks of ice, and survival makes philosophers of everyone. So you let it stay. Soon, it isn't just one. The mice bring friends. They slip in through cracks, dart over straw, wedge themselves between folds of cloth like they pay rent. You lie stiff as a corpse while they scuttle about, gathering under the covers as though they've been invited to a feast. Each little body radiates warmth, faint but real, enough that you can almost convince yourself this is a kind of partnership. You give them scraps, they give you heat. Mutual survival, forged in the dark. Of course, you can't admit this to anyone. Imagine confessing in the square that you willingly shared a blanket with mice. You'd be mocked until spring, your name tied forever to whiskers and squeaks. So you stay silent, pretending you still hate them, pretending you still set traps, all the while hoping your hidden roommates choose your bed again tonight. The secrecy feels shameful, but so does frostbite. The others aren't blind, though. They notice the way you don't leap when a mouse darts across your hand. They see how you mutter less about droppings in the flour. One evening, your cousin eyes you suspiciously and asks why your blanket twitches sometimes. You shrug, feign ignorance, and mutter about drafts, but his gaze lingers. Perhaps he knows. Perhaps he envies you. It isn't all comfort. Mice are restless creatures. They shift constantly, their tiny claws pricking your skin, their tails flicking like cold strings. One lingers too close to your ear, sniffing loudly, and you nearly slap yourself trying to chase it away without waking anyone else. Another decides your chest is the best perch, and you spend an hour staring cross-eyed at its silhouette until it finally scurries off. The smell grows, faint but sour, reminding you that warmth always comes with a price. There's also the risk. Everyone knows mice bring fleas. Fleas bring sickness. Sickness brings priests muttering over your bed while you fade into the straw. You remind yourself of this every time you feel a mouse curl against your ribs. You tell yourself you'll set traps tomorrow, chase them out, patch the holes. But then the cold deepens, the frost thickens on the rafters, and when night comes, you find yourself secretly wishing for their tiny feet again. One brutal evening, when even the dog refuses to uncurl from its corner, and your breath crystallizes before your face, you feel 3 of them nestle against your thigh. They're warm, alive, fragile, and you can't help but feel a flicker of gratitude. You whisper softly, "Stay," like they're loyal hounds, and in your half-frozen delirium you imagine they understand. They don't move, and you sleep more soundly than you have in weeks. The next morning, you wake to find them gone, vanished back into the cracks, leaving only a faint trail of droppings on your blanket. Disgust twists your stomach, but it doesn't erase the memory of warmth. You shake the blanket hard, hoping no one notices, and carry on with your chores. But all day you wonder if they'll return that night, if you'll once again face the shameful choice of killing them or letting them share your bed. You know the truth, though. You won't kill them. Not while the frost still creeps through the walls and the wind howls through the cracks. Not while the cold waits outside, patient and merciless. You'll curse them in the daylight, swear vengeance, tell anyone who'll listen that you hate the vermin. And then, when night falls and the fire dies, you'll listen for the soft scritch of paws, the faint squeak of tiny voices, and lift the edge of your blanket just enough to let them in. Because survival is ugly, shameful, and sometimes whiskered. It begins with a shiver and ends with a song. The night is sharp enough to split stones, and the fire in the hearth has collapsed into a sulky heap of embers that glow like dying eyes. The cottage is silent but for the sound of teeth clattering, bodies shifting, someone muttering in their sleep about warmer summers that probably never happened. And then, from the dark corner near the door, a voice rises, thin, cracked, off-key, but undeniably a voice. It startles you more than the cold does. Someone is singing. The song is not good. It limps through the air like a lame goose, wheezing notes that make you wonder if the singer has ever actually heard music before. It's a hymn, or at least it began as one, though the words are slurred, and the tune drifts into something unrecognizable. Yet something strange happens. The room feels warmer. Not truly, of course. The air still bites, the drafts still creep, your nose still stings, but the sound distracts, fills the emptiness. You realize you're listening, leaning closer, even humming a little without meaning to. Soon others join in, not because they want to, but because silence is colder than noise. A cousin starts clapping in uneven rhythm. Your uncle bellows a line from a carol, his voice so deep it rattles the rafters. A child squeals something about a lamb and forgets the rest. Even the pig snorts in protest or participation, but it's hard to tell. The sound swells, chaotic, tuneless, and wholly alive. For a moment you forget your numb toes, your stiff fingers, the frost gathering on the window. All you know is that the room has found its own fire. The worse the singing gets, the louder everyone becomes. A woman near the hearth sings high enough to curdle milk. A man stomps his boots in rhythm, shaking loose bits of straw, convinced this makes him the drummer of the group. Someone starts humming a chant in Latin they only half remember, and the rest of you repeat it with the confidence of peasants who assume God doesn't care about pronunciation. Each mistake sparks more laughter, and laughter always burns hotter than silence. Outside, the village is alive with it too. Voices drift from cottage to cottage, clashing in the night air, blending into a chorus of survival. You hear a neighbor shouting verses at the moon, daring it to freeze him where he stands. Another group is chanting nonsense words, stomping around the fire pit like they're conducting a ritual to scare away the frost. Somewhere, a drunk sings a ballad about a goat that ran off with a cobbler's wife, his voice echoing down the lane, until even the dogs join in with howls. It spreads like fever. People start believing in the singing cure. They swear each note pushes back the cold, each chorus keeps frostbite from the door. They argue over which songs work best. Psalms, carols, bawdy tavern tunes. But no one agrees, because none of it matters. The point is not melody but noise. The louder the sound, the less you notice your joints stiffening. You can't help but notice the absurdity of it. Everyone insists they're warmer, though the frost still paints white lace on the rafters, though breath still fogs in the air, though you can see your fingers trembling even as you clap. The warmth is imagined, collective, fragile as a dream, but you don't argue. Delusion, after all, is a kind of survival. The blacksmith, never one to do anything quietly, takes to leading the songs when the forge cools for the night. His booming voice shakes dust from the beams, and people crowd in just to be part of the racket. He doesn't know many songs, so he invents them, stringing together rhymes about pigs and snowdrifts and saints who froze on mountains. No one cares if the words make sense. The noise itself is enough, an anchor against the creeping dark. Sometimes, the singing gets so loud it wakes the children, who stumble half asleep into the chaos and add their shrill contributions. Their voices pierce the air like knives, yet the adults cheer, clapping and stomping, as though every wrong note is another log on the fire. You notice that children don't mind the cold the way adults do. They sing because it's fun, because it makes the night less endless, and their joy spills over, warming the room better than any blanket. There are failures too. Once, a man tried to sing alone, refusing to let anyone join in, insisting his voice was strong enough to heat the whole room. He lasted 3 verses before coughing himself into silence, and everyone muttered that this was proof you need many voices, not just one. Another night, a group tried harmonizing, but it fell apart so badly the fire actually hissed as though offended. People took that as a sign. Harmony is for warmer places. Here, dissonance is what keeps you alive. The worst is when the songs fade, when exhaustion sets in and voices grow thin. The silence that follows feels colder than before, heavier, sharper. You pull the blankets tighter, shivering, waiting for someone to start again. Usually it's you, humming without thought, a half-remembered melody from your childhood. And soon, the others join in. You realize then that the cure is not about singing at all. It's about refusing silence, about filling the dark with something louder than fear. By dawn, your throat is raw, your ears ring, and your body is no warmer than it was at midnight. Yet you smile, hoarse and weary, because somehow you made it through. The cold is still there, but it didn't win. You glance at your family, still snoring, still tangled in blankets, and you wonder if they'll remember the songs when summer finally comes. Probably not. But tonight, when the frost creeps back in, someone will start again, and the village will answer, each off-key note defying winter with stubborn, ridiculous noise. You never realize how strange people are until winter digs in its claws. Cold makes fools of everyone, stripping away reason until the only thing left is superstition dressed up as wisdom. You see it in your neighbors first. The woman across the lane sprinkling salt along her threshold, muttering as she goes. She claims it keeps the frost demons out, though she never explains what frost demons look like or why salt would stop them. Still, she does it every night, flicking her wrist with the seriousness of a priest. You laugh at her until you catch yourself eyeing the grain sack in the corner and wondering if maybe, just maybe, a pinch at your own door wouldn't hurt. Garlic, too, becomes a talisman. Not eaten, though plenty do that as well, but tucked under pillows, worn in pouches, hung above beds like a charm. The theory changes depending on who you ask. Some say it drives away spirits that ride in on the cold. Others insist the smell itself confuses the frost, tricking it into thinking the house is already rotten and therefore not worth invading. You don't believe either version, but one night, after your toes nearly turn blue in the draft, you find yourself sliding a clove beneath your straw-stuffed pillow. The smell is overwhelming, sharp and sour, but you tell yourself you're safer. You dream of onions chasing you through fields, and you wake half convinced you've survived some great danger. Children get in on it too. They chant nonsense at the moon, spinning in circles until they collapse in the snow, giggling as though they've tricked winter into sparing them. One boy swears that if you whisper spring 3 times before bed, the season will arrive faster. You try it once, desperate, whispering so no one hears, and feel ridiculous immediately. In the morning, frost covers the door, thicker than ever. You spit into the snow and swear never to try again. But that night, as you climb under the covers, the word hovers in your throat, tempting you. Spring. The old woman near the well has the longest list of rules. Never whistle indoors after sunset, or you'll invite a snowstorm. Always cross your legs at the ankle when you sleep, so the cold can't climb up your body. If you spill water on the floor in January, you must lick your finger and touch the spill, or else your roof will collapse by March. She rattles these off daily, glaring at anyone who dares laugh. And you don't laugh. Not because you believe her, but because she's survived more winters than anyone, and survival makes its own authority. The tavern becomes a shrine of superstition by late season. Men argue over which rituals work, slamming mugs on the table, spilling ale as if alcohol itself could summon warmth. One swears by tying a piece of red cloth around his wrist, claiming it fools the frost into thinking he's already burning. Another insists he wears his boots backward on particularly brutal nights, so the cold loses his trail. They mock each other, laugh, fight, then drink together anyway, each one secretly planning to try the other's trick before the week is out. No one admits it, but everyone wants a charm, even a ridiculous one, when the frost rattles the shutters. You notice the layering of superstitions creeping into your own routine. Salt near the door, garlic near the pillow, a muttered word about spring. You catch yourself tracing little signs on the window glass, meaningless shapes that feel protective in the moment. You scoff at yourself, but you keep doing it. Because what else is there? Firewood is scarce, blankets thinner than they should be, food running low. Superstition fills the gaps where comfort used to live. The strangest of all belongs to your cousin. He claims that if you spit into the hearth before bed, the fire, though dead, remembers you in the morning and burns brighter when lit again. You've watched him do it for weeks, spitting solemnly into the ash, while everyone else pretends not to notice. One dawn, when the fire does catch faster than usual, he struts about, declaring himself a genius. You don't believe him. You don't. And yet, that night, you spit too, pretending it's just by accident. Some villagers get competitive about it. Who has the most reliable superstition? Who has proof? They keep tallies like gamblers. 3 nights warm after sprinkling salt, 2 nights frost-free with garlic, 1 dream of sunshine after chanting spring. They brag and bicker, as though comparing weather charms were sport. You shake your head, but part of you listens closely, storing away the successes, and then there are failures, embarrassing enough to become stories. A man once buried a horseshoe in his yard to ward off the cold, but it froze in place, and he broke his shovel trying to retrieve it. Another tried sleeping with coal under his bed, swearing it would radiate heat, but the coal caught fire, and the cottage nearly went with it. People laugh, shake their heads, but secretly envy them. Even failed superstitions show a willingness to try. The truth, though, is that none of it works. The cold doesn't care about salt or garlic or whispered promises of spring. The frost doesn't flinch from songs, symbols, or charms. It comes regardless, pressing in, gnawing at fingers and toes, painting windows with its mocking lace. Yet the superstitions survive, not because they hold power, but because they hold people together. They give you something to do when helplessness gnaws as sharply as the wind. They let you laugh, argue, or at least pretend there's some trick left untried. One night, lying beneath your pile of blankets, you listen to the wind rattling the shutters and the mice scurrying in the straw. You pull the garlic closer, touch the salt line near the door, and whisper spring 3 times into the dark. You don't believe in any of it. You don't. But still you close your eyes and sleep, half hoping, half dreading, and fully certain that tomorrow you'll do it all again. Because superstition may not stop the cold, but it gives you something the cold can't take. It gives you hope. The cold changes the rules of closeness. In summer, touching another person too long raises eyebrows, sparks, whispers, maybe even earns a scolding from someone's grandmother. But in winter, when the air cuts like a blade and the frost creeps through every crack, no one questions it. 2 people under one blanket is practical, even noble. 3 people is survival. And yet, beneath all the layers of wool and linen, things happen. Things no one admits out loud, but everyone suspects. You feel it yourself when a hand brushes yours in the dark. It might be an accident, the simple chaos of too many bodies tangled on a too small bed. But then it lingers, just a fraction longer than necessary, warm against your skin. You don't move, you don't dare. Outside, the wind claws at the shutters, the fire dies, the dog snores. Inside, 2 hands touch, and suddenly the night doesn't feel so endless. Shared blankets make for strange negotiations. Couples press close, whispering under their breath, pretending their laughter is about the cold. Families shuffle suspiciously when someone accidentally ends up pressed against a neighbor rather than a sibling. And when people wake in the morning, tangled in ways they weren't the night before, they cough loudly, stretch exaggeratedly, and pretend nothing happened. Everyone believes the pretense, or at least pretends to. It's easier that way. The fire pit in the square becomes a stage for this dance. Young couples linger too long, claiming they're still cold, even as their cheeks burn pink and their eyes shine brighter than the embers. They huddle shoulder to shoulder, exchanging words that vanish into the smoke, ignoring the way elders glance at them knowingly. Sometimes the girl laughs too loudly. Sometimes the boy adjusts his cloak, so it falls just so around them both, and everyone else smirks behind their mittens. The cold becomes the best excuse ever invented. Without it, none of this closeness could happen in daylight. With it, anything can. Of course, the gossip circle thrives on these moments. Nothing warms tongues faster than the sight of 2 people who think they're subtle. One evening, you watch as the baker's daughter sneaks an extra log onto the fire so she can sit longer with the Reeves' son. By morning, the entire village has already decided they'll marry by spring. When another girl is spotted holding hands with a shepherd under the blanket pile, 3 versions of the story spring up before breakfast. In one, they're already betrothed. In another, he's promised to someone else. In the third, she's simply stealing his gloves. None are true, but truth is irrelevant. The heat lies in the telling. You're not immune to it either. You notice yourself leaning closer to someone you hadn't thought much of before. Maybe it's the way their breath fogs in the cold, or the way their laugh rings sharper against the night air. Or maybe it's just that survival makes everyone look more appealing. Proximity is intoxicating when everything else is frozen. Your heart races, not from desire exactly, but from the thrill of warmth found where you least expected it. Not all stories end sweetly. Sometimes hands reach for each other in the dark and meet resistance instead of welcome. Sometimes whispers turn into arguments, muffled so children won't hear. Once, you hear of a boy caught sneaking into the wrong cottage under the pretense of warming up. The villagers laughed about it for weeks, though the boy's father did not. Still, even the failures feed the gossip fire, which burns hotter than any hearth. The older folk shake their heads, muttering that winter makes fools of the young. But you notice even they sit closer than usual. Even they drape arms over shoulders and mutter softer words in the dark. No one escapes the pull of warmth. The cold drives everyone together, pushing bodies and hearts closer whether they like it or not. Sometimes, in the midst of it all, you wonder if the frost is cleverer than you give it credit for. Perhaps it knows the only way to keep people from giving up is to push them together, to make them share heat, laughter, even secrets. Perhaps the frost doesn't want to kill you at all. It just wants to watch you fumble your way into love while pretending it's about survival. You never say this out loud, of course. You keep your thoughts tucked under the blanket, alongside the warmth of another hand. In the daylight, you shrug, pretend nothing happened, join in the gossip like everyone else. But at night, when the cold presses hardest, you find yourself hoping the frost lingers just long enough for one more excuse to sit close, to whisper, to hold on. Survival is bitter, But sometimes, in the dark, it tastes a little like sweetness. At first you swear you'll never do it. Firewood is for burning, furniture is for sitting. That's the natural order, the way the world should be. You look at the bench your grandfather built, scarred from years of boots and elbows, and think, never, not this. But then the frost sharpens its teeth, the pile of logs shrinks to nothing, and suddenly you're standing in front of the hearth with a stool in your hands, trying to decide which you value more. Somewhere to rest, or the feeling in your toes. Survival has no patience for sentiment. The stool goes first, sacrificed quickly, its legs chopped down and tossed into the flames. The fire hisses, spits, then roars as if delighted at the upgrade. You sit on the floor, shifting uncomfortably, pretending it isn't humiliating to lose a battle against your own furniture. The warmth is worth it, though. Your fingers uncurl, your breath no longer hangs heavy in the air, and you tell yourself it was a wise choice, not a desperate one. But the cold never stops asking for more. The next night it's the bench, its wide planks splintered under the axe, each piece crackling in the fire like laughter at your expense. The family gathers closer, grateful, but no one mentions the empty space along the wall where the bench once stood. By morning, everyone pretends it was never there. The disappearances spread through the village like plague. A chair vanishes here, a shelf there, a cart dismantled piece by piece until only its iron nails remain. You watch your neighbors eye each other's houses suspiciously, not because of theft, but because they want to see who's burned what, whose pride has fallen furthest. One man swears his wife sold their bed frame to a passing merchant, but everyone knows it's in ashes behind his cottage. It becomes a game of denial. A stool isn't missing, but it was rickety anyway. The table didn't vanish. It was too low for comfort. The cradle by the fire? Outgrown, unneeded. And besides, the baby sleeps fine in a basket. You nod along, telling the same lies yourself. Your door creaks on its hinges, thinner every day, and you wonder how long you can hold out before it too becomes kindling. At night, when the flames flicker low and the cold presses in, you start eyeing the roof. The thatch hangs there innocently, golden and dry, whispering temptation. How flammable is it, really? If you tore off just a little, no one would notice. But then you picture snow pouring through the gap, rain soaking your bedding, and you hesitate. Burning the roof might bring warmth for an hour, but it guarantees misery for months. Still, you keep looking up, measuring risk against frostbite, and you know one day someone in the village will try it. The desperation grows creative. Someone burns their shoe soles, stomping quickly to put out sparks before the flames reach their feet. Another feeds straw into the hearth, which blazes gloriously for 10 seconds before collapsing into smoke. A third tosses in dried dung, plugging his nose and claiming warmth smells better than cold. You laugh, gag, then do the same yourself when your turn comes. Dignity, like furniture, burns easily. You begin to notice the marks of this fire famine everywhere. Cottages lean oddly without their beams. Doors hang crooked where planks have been stripped. The tavern, once proud with its benches, now has patrons squatting on the floor, mugs balanced on knees, as though this were perfectly normal. Even the church hasn't escaped. Someone swears a section of pew disappeared, though the priest insists it was termites. The congregation nods politely, their faces warmed by the suspiciously generous fire roaring in the nave. The gossip turns the destruction into legend. One man supposedly chopped up his bed frame in a single night, slept on the floor, and claimed it was the best sleep he'd ever had. A woman allegedly burned her door, then dared the frost to enter, declaring she was too stubborn to freeze. The stories swell with each retelling, heroic acts of defiance masked as accidents. The truth is uglier, smaller, quieter. People freezing, desperate, looking at their belongings and thinking, wood is wood. You try to ignore the way your home grows emptier. You avoid the corner where the stool once stood, the bare patch of floor where the bench sat, the shelf that is now only nails hammered into the wall. You tell yourself you'll replace it all come spring, when the world is green again and trees grow generous. But in the silence between cracks of the fire, you wonder if you're burning your life piece by piece, trading the future for tonight's breath. Still, when the frost rakes its claws against the windows, you don't hesitate. You grab what you can, break it down, and feed it to the flames. The fire leaps up, hungry and triumphant, and you sit close, feeling warmth seep into your skin, watching the wood turn red, then black, then nothing at all. For a moment, you feel rich. For a moment, you're alive again. By morning, the fire is ash, and the cottage is barer, and you're left staring at what remains, wondering what will go next. The chest at the foot of the bed, the ladder to the loft. You don't say it aloud, but you know. In winter, anything that burns is fuel, and nothing is sacred. Not stools, not benches, not doors, not even the roof you still eye with quiet suspicion. The cottage gives up first. You know it the moment you wake with frost clinging to your blanket. The fire nothing but cold ash, your breath so thick it feels like you're drowning in your own lungs. The walls groan under the weight of ice, the shutters rattle like bones, and even the dog refuses to move, curled into a stiff ball of despair. You try to tell yourself it's tolerable, that you can last until morning, but when your toes go numb inside 2 pairs of socks and a porridge rag, you accept the truth. Tonight, survival means abandoning the cottage altogether. Tonight, you go to the barn. The barn is already buzzing by the time you arrive. Word spreads fast when homes freeze, and apparently half the village made the same decision. The cows snort indignantly at the intrusion, their warm bodies pressed together in a living wall of steam. Chickens flutter and squawk, unsettled by the sudden party. A horse stamps its hooves, blowing mist into the air like a noble but unimpressed host. And in the middle of it all, villagers huddle in cloaks and blankets, muttering greetings, pretending this is perfectly reasonable. The barn has become the village's nightclub, admission free, drinks limited to goat's milk if you can wrestle some from the source. The heat is staggering, not pleasant exactly, thick with the smell of manure, hay, and animals who have never heard of courtesy. But compared to the frost outside, it's paradise. You squeeze between 2 neighbors, both sweating under too many layers, and feel warmth seep into your bones. Steam rises off the livestock, mingling with human breath, fogging the air until you can hardly see. Somewhere a fiddle scrapes to life, its strings sharp and uneven, but the sound is enough to draw laughter. Someone shouts, "Play louder," as though the barn hasn't already reached the volume of chaos. The first dance begins without warning. A man jumps up, stomping his boots against the straw, swinging his arms like a scarecrow possessed. At first everyone laughs, shaking their heads, muttering that he's mad. But soon another joins, then another, until the center of the barn is a swirl of stomps, claps, and shouted verses half remembered from harvest feasts. You clap along despite yourself, your hands burning with friction, your body moving just enough to remind you you're still alive. The cows watch in baffled silence, tails swishing as though keeping time with the music. The goats, however, do not stay silent. One leaps into the chaos, hooves clicking against the floor, eyes wide with either joy or menace. It's hard to tell with goats. The crowd roars with laughter, clapping faster, shouting encouragement. The goat prances, bucks, then collides with the dancing man, who topples into the straw while everyone howls. You join in the laughter, but something about the goat's eyes unsettles you. They gleam in the lantern light, too knowing, too eager, as though it understands the absurdity of humans copying its movements. When it rears up on 2 legs, you swear it's mocking you. The memory scars you, though at the time you're too busy sweating and laughing to care. The barn pulses with energy, a rhythm built from stomps, bleats, and the occasional neigh. Even those who swore they'd never dance are clapping now, voices rising in ragged song, feet pounding against the packed earth. The children squeal as chickens scatter between them, feathers flying like confetti. For a moment, the barn feels less like a refuge and more like celebration, as though winter itself can be defeated with noise and movement. But the heat comes with its own dangers. Cloaks come off, shawls are loosened, sweat drips down backs and foreheads. The air grows thick, choking, and you realize that too much warmth can feel just as unbearable as too little. A woman collapses onto a hay bale, fanning herself with her apron, swearing she hasn't sweated like this since summer harvest. A man pulls his hat off, steam rising from his hair, and declares he may never need a fire again. Yet no one leaves, because stepping outside now would be like leaping into death's arms. So the barn keeps filling, more bodies crammed in, more voices joining the roar. Eventually, exhaustion dulls the frenzy. The fiddle falls silent, the dancers collapse into straw, the goats retreat to their corner. You slump against a cow, not caring about the smell, letting its steady heat seep through your layers. The laughter dies into murmurs, then into snores, and soon the barn is a patchwork of humans and animals all pressed together in one desperate quilt. You close your eyes, still smelling manure, still hearing the faint echo of stomps and bleats, and wonder if survival has always been this ridiculous. By morning, the frost still waits outside, silent and unbroken. But inside, the barn is alive, steaming with breath, echoing with snores and the occasional lowing of cows. You wake sore, straw clinging to your hair, sweat stiff in your shirt, but alive. You step outside briefly, the cold stabbing like knives, and glance back at the barn. It looks ordinary, just wood and thatch, but you know what happened inside. You know how a barn became a nightclub, how laughter and stomps and even a dancing goat carried you through the night. And though you'll never admit it to anyone, you also know that if the frost claws at your door again tonight, you'll be back. Not for the cows, not for the warmth, not even for the fiddle. You'll be back, because once you've seen a goat dance, part of you secretly wants to see it again. The bread comes out of the oven with a thud, not a sigh. It lands on the table like a stone, rattling spoons, bending the knife that dares to test its crust. You stare at it, wondering if this is food or building material. The baker insists it's edible, though his tone carries more hope than conviction. You tap the loaf with your knuckle and hear a hollow ring, the sound of wood struck with iron. Someone mutters it could patch a hole in the roof. Someone else suggests using it as a weapon. No one suggests actually eating it. At least not yet. Still, bread is bread, and in winter, you don't waste what you have. Families carry their loaves home like treasure, though they cradle them carefully. Not because they're fragile, but because they're heavy enough to bruise. You take yours under your arm, walking through the frost with the proud misery of someone who knows their dinner could also be their gravestone. The loaf radiates faint warmth from the oven, enough to make you clutch it tighter, enough to convince you it might have other uses. Soon the village discovers the truth. Bread doubles as insulation. Tuck it under your cloak, and it presses against your chest like a stubborn, lumpy stone, holding in what little heat you've managed to keep. Sleep with it at your side, and you almost believe the frost is less sharp. Children start cuddling loaves instead of dolls, their faces pressed against crust so stiff it leaves imprints on their cheeks. No one laughs, because everyone has tried the same thing in secret. By morning, of course, the illusion collapses. The bread cools, drawing heat away from your body instead of giving it, leaving you with both frostbite and crumbs scattered through your bed. The crust flakes, sticking to your hair, itching your neck, impossible to shake free. You curse the loaf, hurl it across the room, then fetch it back sheepishly because you still have to eat. Eating is its own battle. Knives bend against the crust, spoons bounce off, teeth ache at the first attempt, sending shocks through your jaw, forcing you to pause with tears in your eyes. You soak it in broth, in ale, even in snow melted over the fire, but still the bread resists, defiant. Some swear by smashing it with a hammer first, reducing it to jagged chunks small enough to chew. Others gnaw at the edges like dogs, patient and stubborn. You try both methods, alternating between humiliation and desperation, until finally a mouthful softens enough to swallow. The taste is faint, flour and ash, but victory has never been so bitter. The bread's sturdiness earns it new roles. One boy uses half a loaf as a ball, kicking it through the square until it lodges in a snowbank. A man defends himself in an argument by brandishing his loaf like a cudgel, the other backing away nervously, knowing one strike could break a nose. A woman props open her door with hers, declaring it more reliable than a stone. Bread becomes everything except what it was meant to be. Gossip spreads of someone using bread to repair a wall. Another swears they saw a loaf repurposed as a step, strong enough to hold a child climbing to the loft. The tales grow wilder with each telling. Bread used as shields, bread hurled at wolves, bread sunk in the river, and still intact come spring. You laugh, but then you catch yourself eyeing your own loaf, wondering how much weight it could bear. The tavern erupts one night into a contest. Who can throw their loaf the farthest? Men line up outside, hurling bricks of bread into the snow, each thud followed by cheers or jeers. The blacksmith wins, of course, his loaf vanishing into the drifts like a stone into water. The priest scolds them for wasting food, but his voice cracks when someone points out the loaves are too hard to eat anyway. He leaves with his head bowed, clutching his own loaf like a club. Despite all this, bread remains central to survival. It fills your stomach, even if it breaks your teeth first. It warms your chest, even if it leaves crumbs in your bed. It reminds you, in its stubborn heaviness, that life continues, that flour and fire still exist in the world. You curse it daily, mock it nightly, but still you line up at the baker's door each week, waiting for the sound of stone loaves hitting the table. You never stop dreaming of soft bread, though. Bread that bends under a knife. Bread that sighs when you break it open. Bread that crumbles in your mouth instead of shattering it. You imagine it constantly, warm and golden, the smell filling a cottage that doesn't creak with frost. You promise yourself that when summer comes, when the wheat grows again, you'll eat bread that doesn't bruise your ribs. For now, you press your loaf to your chest, shiver under your cloak, and whisper gratitude you don't feel. Because winter has taught you that bread isn't just food. Bread is weapon, shield, pillow, ballast, punishment, companion. And if you're lucky, it's also breakfast. You don't plan on becoming a winter fashion model. No one does. But when the cold lingers long enough, survival and vanity collide in ways you never thought possible. The mirror is long gone, sold or smashed or burned, yet every frost-rimed puddle becomes a runway glimpse. You lean over, see your reflection in the ice, and realize you look less like a villager and more like a relic dragged from a glacier. Your nose is red enough to guide travelers, your fingers are the color of blueberries, and your hair is stiff with frost, standing at angles that defy gravity. You're part miserable, part runway ready, whether you want to be or not. The village embraces it. People shuffle into the square wrapped in cloaks, patched beyond recognition. Scarves layered until they're more noose than garment. Boots stiff as wood. Each arrival sparks commentary. "Look at him," someone whispers. "Cheeks like apples left out too long." Another mutters. Her lashes froze together. Positively chic. The compliments sting as much as the wind, but no one denies it. The cold has invented a new kind of contest. Who looks the most tragically frozen? Your neighbors take it seriously. The blacksmith, broad and stubborn, struts into the forge, bareheaded just so frost will paint his beard white, making him look like a saint carved from ice. The baker's daughter intentionally lingers by the well, letting the steam from her breath harden into little crystals along her fringe. Even children compete, coming home with frozen snot icicles dangling proudly, daring each other to break them off and see whose clump is biggest. Parents shake their heads, but secretly admire the dedication. You join in, though you tell yourself you're above it. You wrap your cloak loosely enough that the wind bites through, just so you can stride into the tavern with shoulders dusted in snow. You tilt your chin upward as you walk, allowing the frost to catch in your eyebrows until you look both miserable and magnificent. When people glance at you, half in sympathy and half in admiration, you feel a perverse pride. Who knew hypothermia could feel so glamorous? The gossip circle fuels the obsession. Someone whispers that the Reeves' wife was spotted with frostbite on her toes, and suddenly everyone else is showing off their own. Feet are bared in taverns, blue skin compared like trophies, toes wiggled to prove they're still attached. A man boasts of losing feeling in 3 fingers, and the room gasps as though he's confessed to owning silk. The line between tragedy and trend blurs until no one can tell if frostbite is shame or status. Practicality, of course, collapses under the weight of vanity. Hats are left off because hair stiff with frost makes for better conversation. Gloves are discarded in favor of hands proudly purple, proof of endurance and daring. Cloaks are patched not neatly but flamboyantly, each scrap of fabric chosen for contrast rather than warmth. One woman stitches feathers into her hem, declaring that birds know how to survive cold, so why shouldn't she? She looks like a half-frozen peacock, but people clap anyway. Even the animals get dragged into it. Dogs trot around with scarves, knotted badly. Goats wear bits of dyed cloth tied to their horns, and chickens strut with ribbons that freeze stiff. It becomes impossible to tell whether the village has lost its mind or simply embraced a new culture of survival as art. Either way, everyone plays along. You catch yourself braiding straw into your cloak one morning, convincing yourself it's insulation, though in truth you just want people to notice. Not everyone survives the trend gracefully. The priest tries to scold the village, warning that pride is sinful and frostbite is no joke. But when he steps outside, the wind sculpts his hair into frozen peaks, and his robe stiffens into dramatic folds, and suddenly he looks like a prophet descended from a mountain. The gossip declares him the best dressed of all, and he's too flustered to deny it. From then on, even his sermons carry a certain fashionable flair. You realize the absurdity of it one night when you can't feel your cheeks at all, yet someone compliments their rosy color. You nod, trying to smile, but your lips are too stiff to move. It dawns on you that fashion here is measured not in cloth, but in suffering. The colder you look, the better you appear. The more tragic your appearance, the more enviable your style. It is ridiculous, but so is every part of survival in winter. Morning comes with frost heavier than ever, the kind that coats windows in thick lace and stiffens cloaks before you even step outside. You wrap yourself up anyway, carefully arranging layers so just enough skin shows to catch the bite. As you walk into the square, you pass others doing the same. Noses red, fingers stiff, hair glittering with frost. No one speaks of the cold anymore. They speak of appearances, of who wore it best, of who endured longest, of who made misery look magnificent. And in the middle of it all, you feel both ridiculous and proud, a shivering model on a runway of snow, strutting not because you want to, but because winter has demanded it. The cold is cruel, but at least it has given you something to compete over, something to laugh about, something to turn into art. And when you crawl back into bed that night, cheeks raw, hair frozen stiff, fingers aching, you tell yourself you've survived another day. You also tell yourself you looked good doing it. The night begins the way they all do, with the last ember flickering, the last blanket tugged, the last sigh muttered into the dark. But this one doesn't end. It stretches, heavy and cruel, the kind of night that feels less like time passing and more like time grinding its teeth. The rafters creak with every gust of wind. Beams groan as if they'd rather collapse than endure another hour, and the shutters slam like drums, keeping rhythm with the cold. Every sound reminds you the cottage is tired, and so are you. You lie there under the pile of cloaks and rags, waiting for sleep that never comes. Your body refuses, too tense, too aware of the frost that creeps under the door. The air is sharp enough to cut, biting into your nostrils, stiffening your hair with ice. Your toes curl instinctively, trying to protect themselves, but they've gone beyond sensation. Numbness is the only blanket they know. Someone whispers nearby, soft and uncertain, telling a story that is less tale and more distraction. You lean into the sound, grateful for anything that isn't the silence, because silence feels colder than the frost. The stories come in fragments, tales of saints who lit candles that burned for weeks, of kings who kept winter at bay with walls of gold, of wolves driven off by songs sung loudly in the dark. No one believes them. Not really, but belief is beside the point. The words themselves are fire enough, their rhythm keeping eyelids from closing too heavily, keeping despair from pressing too hard. One child whispers about a summer that lasted forever, with wheat taller than houses, and though it's clearly nonsense, everyone listens hungrily. You shift, pressing closer to the huddle of bodies. Uncle Oswin snores, a deep rumble that vibrates through the straw, and you curse him at first. But then the sound grows steady, rhythmic, and you almost convince yourself it's not snoring at all. It's wolves howling, distant but circling. The thought makes you clutch the blanket tighter, though you know wolves wouldn't bother with a cottage full of coughing, frost-bitten peasants when there are sheep easier to catch. Still, the sound is unnerving, and the night doesn't need help being long. The cold plays tricks. You swear you hear footsteps in the loft, though no one's up there. You imagine shadows crawling along the rafters, shapes forming in the frost-laced windows. Your mind drifts in strange directions, inventing terrors just to keep itself awake. If you fall asleep, you think, the cold will claim you. You imagine frost seeping over your chest, pressing down, freezing your lungs. You stay awake, blinking hard, even when your eyes ache. Better to invent monsters than to risk never waking. Someone tries singing, softly at first, then louder, but the voice cracks on the third line and dies into embarrassed silence. Another mutters prayers under their breath, words that loop endlessly, not for salvation but for the comfort of repetition. A woman near the hearth begins humming tunelessly, and slowly others join in, not with harmony, but with noise. It fills the cottage, this low, ragged sound, like bees buzzing in a frozen hive, and it holds back the emptiness. But the night refuses to move. You count heartbeats, breaths, the creaks of the roof, all in an effort to measure time, but the count stretches until numbers lose meaning. You close your eyes, open them again, and nothing has changed. The dark is still heavy, the air still sharp, the fire still nothing but a faint glow. You wonder if dawn has forgotten you, if the sun has turned its face away and left you buried in eternal night. Children whimper, their small voices cracking the silence, and parents hush them with promises no one believes. It will be morning soon, they say, but the words taste hollow. Soon has no place here. Soon is a lie you tell to keep teeth from chattering. The night laughs, though you can't hear it, only feel it in the way the frost thickens, the way your joints ache, the way even hope seems stiff. At some point, exhaustion overpowers fear. Heads droop, bodies slump, the whispering fades. You teeter on the edge of sleep, fighting it, clawing at wakefulness, but your body betrays you. You drift into strange dreams, the fields of ice that stretch forever, a sun that never rises, wolves with Uncle Oswin's snore for voices. You jolt awake, heart racing, only to find nothing has changed. The night still grips the world, the cold still presses, and the snoring still rattles the beams. You try to mark the passage of hours, but the dark refuses measurement. It swallows time, chews it, spits it back as more dark. You realize this is why people tell stories and sing songs and mutter nonsense. Not because it makes them warm, but because it gives the illusion of moving forward. Without sound, without words, the night becomes endless punishment. With them, at least, you can pretend the clock still ticks. At last, after what feels like a lifetime, there is the faintest shift. Not warmth, not light, just a softening of the dark, a thinning of the silence. The rooster crows weakly, his voice cracked from cold, but the sound slices through the stillness like a blade. You sit up, stiff and sore, squinting at the window. The frost still clings, the wind still sighs, but a thin thread of gray pushes through the black. Morning has remembered you. After all, you sag with relief, though your body is no warmer than before. The night has ended, but it hasn't let go entirely. It lingers in your bones, in your skin, in the way your breath still fogs with every exhale. You survived, but the longest night has left its mark. And as you shuffle toward the fire, coaxing the embers with trembling fingers, you wonder quietly, dreadfully, if tonight will stretch even longer. The first light of dawn drags itself over the horizon like a wounded animal, reluctant and half-hearted. It's not the triumphant blaze you pray for, not the golden flood that stories promise. It's gray, sour, and exhausted, like it resents being summoned at all. You blink into it, eyes crusted from frost and fitful sleep, and realize the sun isn't here to save you. It's here to remind you you've survived, nothing more. The rooster crows, his voice ragged and cracked, not the proud fanfare of a new day, but the offended squawk of a bird who expected corpses to pick over. You glare at him from under your blanket heap, your joints too stiff to rise, your mouth too dry to curse properly. He struts outside in the frost, smug in his feathers, and you briefly consider cooking him. But firewood is scarce, and besides, even your hunger feels frozen. So the rooster lives another day, screaming at the sky like a herald no one asked for. Inside the cottage, bodies shift slowly, peeling apart from the tangled mass they formed in the night. Cloaks crack with frost when they're shaken, straw sticks to hair, and the air smells of sweat, smoke, and despair, reheated for the 100th time. Someone groans, someone else coughs, and Uncle Oswin farts loudly enough to silence the rooster. You all sit there, blinking at the weak light that seeps through frost-painted windows, and admit it only to yourselves. Dawn has come, and it has brought nothing worth celebrating. You force yourself to move, each step an act of rebellion against a world determined to freeze you in place. The floor bites through your boots, the air stabs your lungs, but you keep going, because morning demands activity whether you're ready or not. Someone must poke at the ashes. Someone must scrape the frost from the bucket. Someone must fetch water from the well. The chores begin like rituals of penance, each one proof that life continues even when no one wants it to. Outside, the cold still rules. The sky may be lighter, but the air has lost none of its bite. The frost glitters cruelly on every surface, making beauty out of misery, turning rooftops and fields into something worth staring at, until your fingers remind you they're stiff and blue. You stomp through the snow, hearing it squeal beneath your boots, and wonder if this is what eternity feels like. Endless repetition, endless cold, endless trudging toward nothing. The villagers shuffle into the square, bundled in cloaks that sag with frost, faces gray with exhaustion. No one smiles. A few nods are exchanged, a few muttered greetings, but mostly there is silence. The forge hasn't yet woken, the tavern hasn't yet poured ale, and the gossip circle hasn't yet warmed its tongues. Everyone is waiting for someone else to pretend this day matters. Until then, you all stand there, watching your breath curl into the air like smoke from a fire that refuses to catch. You notice how the sun doesn't climb. It hovers, low and weak, a pale disk smudged by clouds, casting no warmth and little light. It looks embarrassed, as though it knows it isn't enough. You raise your face to it anyway, desperate for even a flicker of heat, but all you get is the sting of wind cutting across your cheeks. The cold hasn't left. It's just crouched in the shadows, waiting for the sun to tire, waiting for tonight. Breakfast is a parody of food. Bread too hard to chew, porridge too thick to stir, broth so thin it tastes only of steam. You huddle around it anyway, slurping greedily, letting the bowls warm your hands even if the contents fail your stomach. Children whine, adults snap, and everyone returns to silence again. Eating is less about pleasure than proof. You're still alive enough to chew. The rooster crows again, mocking you for your grim feast, and someone throws a crust in his direction. He dodges smugly, flapping onto the roof, his feathers catching what little light there island. He looks like royalty compared to you, dressed in frostbitten rags, and you curse him under your breath. If survival had a mascot, it would be that arrogant bird, surviving every night without fire, laughing in your faces as you burn furniture for heat. Work begins slowly. The blacksmith pokes at his forge, coaxing it into life. Farmers check tools they won't use for months. Women beat frozen clothes against posts, muttering about holes in the cloth. You join in, hands clumsy, movements mechanical, your mind still caught in the long dark of the night. You don't want to do any of it, but idleness feels colder than labor. So you move, not to thrive, not even to progress, but just to prove the cold hasn't won yet. And all the while, you keep glancing at the sky. The sun crawls sluggishly, barely shifting, as though reluctant to admit it's day at all. The gray light deepens instead of brightening, a reminder that time here is a cruel joke. Morning is only a pause between punishments. The frost hasn't retreated. It has merely stepped back, licking its lips, preparing for tonight's return. By midday, you are exhausted, though you've done almost nothing. Your body still aches from shivering. Your mind still hums with fragments of whispered stories. Your chest still feels tight with the weight of dark hours. You sit on the bench that hasn't yet been burned, clutching a crust of bread, and stare into the square. The rooster struts. Villagers mutter. Smoke rises faintly from chimneys. Life continues, indifferent, dragging you along whether you want it or not. You realize then what dawn truly island. It isn't salvation, and it isn't victory. It's a reminder. You've lived through another night, yes, but the cold hasn't gone. It's still here, crouched at the edge of vision, waiting to seep back into your bones. Dawn doesn't care that you survived. It only resets the punishment, readying you for the next round. And tonight, when the sun sinks again, you know the frost will return, grinning, ready to stretch the hours longer than before. Survival never feels like triumph. It feels like trudging through another morning with straw stuck to your hair, frost clinging to your lashes, and porridge bubbling in the pot like it's plotting revenge. There's no miracle cure for winter. No saint descending with a blazing torch. No lord suddenly generous with firewood. There's only you, your neighbors, your stubbornness, and a collection of bad decisions strung together like beads on a string. And somehow, those beads make a necklace strong enough to hang on until spring. The wisdom everyone promised you doesn't exist. No ritual keeps the frost away. No layering trick makes linen behave like wool. No potion of onions or garlic ever does more than leave you stinking. The cold comes every night. The fires sputter. The blankets tear. And you do it all again anyway. You stop expecting solutions. You learn that the only cure is endurance. And endurance is just another word for refusing to fall over. Porridge becomes both savior and enemy. Thick, gloopy, unkillable. It feeds you whether you like it or not. Some days you bless it, clutching the hot bowl as warmth seeps into your frozen fingers. Other days you curse it, gagging on the same gluey taste, convinced it has absorbed too much of your own misery. You joke that the porridge has developed a soul, that it stares back when you eat it, that it's mocking your weakness. And when someone swears it growled last night, you don't even laugh. You just nod. The bad decisions keep piling up. Each one necessary, each one ridiculous. You burn furniture, you cuddle mice, you sleep beside goats that fart like thunder. You walk outside with bread bricks tucked under your arm because they hold heat better than a cloak. You let your cousins spit in the fire for luck. Your uncle chant songs to scare off frost demons. Your neighbor smear garlic on his chest like perfume. You mock them in daylight, but at night you copy them, just in case. The dignity you started the season with is gone. Frostbite has chewed at your pride as much as your skin. You don't mind anymore if people see you waddling under 6 layers, if they hear your teeth clatter, if they notice the way you sleep with your mouth open to steal the warmth of others' breath. Pride froze weeks ago. What's left is the raw comedy of existence, and you cling to it because it's warmer than shame. The village has learned to laugh at itself. It's the only real weapon you have. You laugh at the rooster who crows like he saved you, at the bread that cracks teeth, at the blacksmith's goat who still dances better than half the villagers. You laugh when someone slips on the ice. Laugh when Uncle Oswin snores like a bear being strangled. Laugh when blankets vanish in the night and reappear wrapped around the thief's guilty shoulders. It isn't kindness, it's survival. Silence is cold. Laughter burns. Even in the worst nights, when the fire dies and the frost creeps close enough to sting your cheeks, someone always finds a joke. A muttered line about toes falling off, a whispered imitation of the priest's nasal chant, a fart so loud it startles the dog into barking. The laughter that follows is messy, tired, desperate, but it's real. You huddle closer, warmed not by flames or blankets, but by the absurdity of being alive when you shouldn't be. By the end of winter, you don't feel wiser. You feel worn, patched together like an old cloak, bits of yourself missing but enough left to keep standing. You've survived, mostly intact, though your dignity has frostbite and your patience has died at least twice. Your neighbors look the same, faces raw, eyes sunken, clothes stiff. Yet when you meet in the square, you smile anyway. You survived, and survival is the only joke you all understand. Spring will come eventually. The frost will retreat. The sun will stretch higher. The fields will soften. You'll plant again, sweat again, curse the flies again. But you'll carry winter inside you, the memory of long nights, burnt furniture, and laughter louder than the cold. You'll remember that you endured not because of wisdom or miracles, but because you were too stubborn to die and too foolish to stop laughing. That's the joke, and you're still laughing.